There was one truism that Pooh held close to his heart. Parents make it very easy for him and others to corrupt their children, sometimes way too easy. And we're not even talking about the parents who corrupt their own children sexually by molesting them. We're talking parental actions ranging from dad and or mum pimping their own children out, to disbelieving their child when he says grandpa has been touching him on his private parts, all the way to throwing their kid out on the streets for not measuring up to their religious dogma and moral sensibilities. Exploiting one's own child for gain, whether that gain is sinister or for the greater good, always leads to ruin. Pooh was looking angrily across the table at Ganymede from a corner in Ralcock's sitting room, where the sickies would gather to select a boy to be with. Neither of them was there for that. The Demidemon had been at the Kit Kat Club in Berlin, doing erotic performances for the changing audiences until his target arrived, a 27-year-old Austrian named Walter Redder, who was working with Hitler to form the future 16th SS Panzergrenadier Division. An informant had told Pooh Redder frequented the club. Redder had a crucial but loose connection to the vitally important Thomas von Gaul ruining. He needed interrogating, but in such a form that wouldn't alter the timeline. Thus, seduction and pillow talk it would be. The Nazi officer was only in Berlin for a short time longer before he'd be off to murdering civilians, while racking up war crimes that would see him convicted before an Italian military court in Bologna for ordering the execution of 2,700 civilians in Tuscany and Emilia. Pooh had been behind stage giving the sociopath a lap dance when Agent Swallows had appeared with an urgent dispatch from his aide-de-camp Agent Whopper. The imp immediately departed the Kit Kat Club, leaving the sociopath Reader high and dry with his little swollen dick. Pooh resented having to play with Reader's adult micropenis, so he was already in a testy mood. He entered the pink mist, muttering, "Were I wanting to play with an underdeveloped penis, it would be that of an undeveloped boy." Known for his legendary grudges, generally born of minor slights, Pooh later tracked down Reader to a hospital in 1991 Vienna, where he beat the old man to death with a bedpan while making fun of his tiny member. Pooh's day had started in the south of France on September 18th, 1942, bouncing between the younger and Nazis, then back to July 11th, 1934, in Munich for the elder, and then a return to September 18th, 1942, but this time to Berlin for Reader, and now he was in Bangkok on April 10th, 2017, after hearing a July 2nd, 1969 mission he'd entrusted Ganymede with went all kinds of wrong. That was what the dispatch was about. Ganymede had abandoned an important assignment involving placing a runaway boy named Robbie into the Manson family. That group's leader, Charles Manson, was, like Pooh, an elevated demidemon who had earned its freedom and promotion from Candyman. The Demon Lord was quite impressed with Manson's ability to thrive inside the soul furnace despite the unrelenting tortures he was subjected to. Candyman decided to set him loose on the mortal plane to run amok corrupting the young. Manson had agreed to mentor Robbie as a favour to his old friend Pooh. The cult leader had already planned a mission for the next month where the kid could carry out Pooh's wishes. The boy was to be manipulated into taking the fetus of actress Sharon Tate and then delivering it to a group of feral humans in the Great Smoky Mountains. The imp had wanted a special 75th birthday present for his old associate Jed, who led the clan. The fetus and Robbie would be the perfect dinner guests for the wild cannibals. They'd be the sweet and sour chicken dish, the innocent and the corrupted blended into a tantalising meal. The celebratory dinner with its rare entree was now a no-go. That miserly time God gives you one shot, no do-overs. Now the party was ruined. Pooh was barely containing his rage. It was only because they were at this particular brothel, which had diplomatic rules, that the imp was controlling himself. Clearly, it was the reason the Trojan prince went there to hide out in the past after sending word to Pooh requesting a rendezvous to discuss the failed assignment. He needed a safe place from the imp's wrath. Well, a safe place for sex tourists and demons and their minions, not so much a safe place for the boys being trafficked out of there. Still wearing his revealing costume from the Kit Kat Club, which exposed his buttocks and suggested cleavage that did not exist, the tired and fuming Pooh looked Agent Cubera in the eyes and sharply said, I want a full accounting of what happened, Ganny. Do it quickly before that besotted bastard that's ogling me staggers over and flesh peddler Rollcock has a bloody beheading on its hands. As the inebriated sex tourist decided to go visit Pooh and Ganymede's table, he was met with the Demidemon's withering glare, and a switchblade pointed at his face, causing him to backpedal and search for less dangerous boys. Hidden in the darkest alley of Bangkok's Soi Twilight sex district is a seedy two-storey establishment called Rollcock's Spoilt Dove Brothel, which caters to degenerates seeking to satisfy their dark desires for young boys through sex and pain. Those degenerates are not only human men, but the shadow dwellers as well. All of them kun rak dek, boy lovers. Yet no love enters the equation. It is a sick appetite, a twisted hunger, a depraved craving, not love. Thailand is a source, transit and destination country for children trafficked for sexual exploitation. It has more than 100,000 sex workers. Of these, at least 40% are under 18 with preteen ki, chicken, not uncommon. A significant number are boys. They are the dek safini, the boy whores, and the ki safini, the chicken whores. Traffickers prey on boys at bus stations or go to villages to recruit them. The boys quickly run up debts with pimps and bar owners for clothes, food, housing, drugs and money, sent back home to their poor families, forcing them to remain working. Children are trafficked into Thailand from Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam. Victims from Bangladesh, Pakistan, North Korea and China also transit through Thailand on their way to be sold in the United States, Western Europe and Russia. At times, Western boys are brought through the tunnels to Thailand. Driven from their villages by poverty, boys and so-called ladyboys or transgender girls are trafficked to the cities, lured by promises of jobs in restaurants, then forced into sex work. There are at least 10,000 ladyboys working in Bangkok's sex industry. Go-go bars, karaoke lounges and parlours offering soapy massages. Bubble baths that end with sex can be found in most cities and beach towns such as Bangkok, Phuket and Pattaya. Although prostitution is illegal in Thailand, it is tolerated. Authorities turn a blind eye towards the illicit activities, as many of the 40 million tourists visiting Thailand expect to engage in the sex trade. Certain men come there exclusively for young boy flesh. They care not for beaches or souvenirs. They want to use boys in ways they can't back home where the risk is greater. City leaders find the foreign money pouring in to be quite appealing. Often there are officials paid off by the pimps and bar owners to ignore things. The problem is so vast that more decent officials have partnered with airlines and charities to warn visitors about child sex trafficking, urging them to report suspected cases. Countries have passed laws prohibiting child sex tourism, meaning abusers can be prosecuted in their home nations were they to travel to another nation to engage in child prostitution. Still, the problem persists. Prostitution is a normalised part of Thai society, and those engaged in prostitution do not face the same degree of stigmatisation present in other countries. This tolerance is mostly due to the money generated in the sex industry. Even parents will sell a child or two into the sex trade to support the rest of the family. Thais traditionally have an obligation to secure their family's well-being and status, so they turn their children into a marketable sex commodity. The broken victims, Enk Firabnisaise, or soiled doves, dwell in a dark world, where their minds, bodies and souls are slowly destroyed. Such lives often lead them to self-harming and suicidal tendencies, or plunges them into alcohol and drugs, where they can be numb to it all. Violence and abuse are common, as is substance abuse and sexually transmitted infections including HIV and AIDS. Rollcock's Spoilt Dove Brothel is the worst of the worst. It lures the most sadistic and depraved among human men, usually Americans and Brits and the demonic beings. None of the boys ranging in ages from 5 to 16 want to be there where they will be hurt and sometimes killed during adult pleasure pursuits. It's also one of the few establishments in Thailand offering white children, boys and ladyboys, instead of the usual Asian children one sees working the market. Indeed, Rollcock specialises in American and European boys exclusively. The creature had been freely roaming the earth for 100 years and had developed a taste for young white boys and their flesh. Rollcock is a rogue pit demon acting of its own volition without any allegiance to a particular demon lord. It was formerly a gallows serving in the Sumerian demon Asag's forces until that lord was slain. For Asag, so hideous that his presence alone made fish boil alive in the rivers, Rolcock drug souls to hell. Now he drags boys to Bangkok. Previously, he'd sold his prey, most especially Romani and Jewish boys, to the Gestapo. Any boy would do, however. What he didn't sell, he ate. As a gallows, he was known to snatch a son from a man's knee just to enjoy a sweet kiss, and leave mothers screaming in despair as he befouled and ate alive their children in front of them before killing the little boys and girls and then taking their souls to Asag. Now, he prefers living boys to take to his clients. Being an unaligned demon would normally make it vulnerable, but due to a treaty agreed to by the Dark Realms, the Spoilt Dove brothel is considered neutral territory where any demon and its subjects, no matter who they are devoted to, can visit and mingle with the mortal men, they're not having a clue as to what they are. Demons gather on the first floor to negotiate treaties, enter pacts, hammer out personal issues, and socialise with their peers. After their business is concluded, they typically then partake of tormenting the male children they take upstairs in ways only a damned one is skilled at. Such guests are comped by Rolcock, who makes its profit at the human-to-human child sex tourism end. These days, the mortal doves served up at the brothel to fiends, human and not, are obtained by Rolcock via its finding mortal runaway boys out on the streets in the Americas and Western and Eastern Europe. At times, the Rouge Demon will purchase his stock from the black market stockpile of demon-corrupted boys that haven't been slain for whatever reason and carried off to a realm. The private auctions are open to flesh peddlers like Rolcock and its human counterparts. The brothel only provides living flesh, so as not to draw the demons wanting to kill a boy in order to carry them off to a realm. That would break the uneasy peace between all the Dark Ones. None of the boys being pimped out at Rolcock's would ever suffer a demon realm. It was the only bright spot in their short, troubled lives. Working in the brothel was a horrible existence, but it was far better than the unending suffering a boy would find in the realms. At times, some of the boys are killed, but it is during play, not with the intention of taking the boy's soul away. Snuffing a boy is part of the experience at the brothel. Not all partake of it, but enough do so that Rolcock is constantly busy finding and grooming replacements. You can smother the boy to death, butcher him, snap his neck, rough play him until he breaks, whip him to shreds, drown him with your piss or whatever you desire, but his soul is not yours to take. A handler employed by Rolcock isn't called for until the client is fully done with their boy, alive or dead. Necrophilia is quite common among demon kind, and to a slightly lesser extent with the mortal men too. For them, corpses still have a use. When the abuse is done, the handler comes in and carries out the body where they're then carted off to a particular meat market. Before that occurs, Rolcock cuts off select portions of the bodies and stores them in his personal food locker. Although their souls are untouchable, Rolcock does a brisk side business, wholesaling their bodies to ghouls and cannibals via a third-party processor. The proprietor of that place then fills the orders for human flesh he has, with the rest being sold to an unknowing public wanting freshly made sausages. Living or dead, the flesh business is good, so Rolcock always needs more boys. Sex trafficking demons are adept at identifying children with noticeable vulnerabilities and needs. The cast-outs, the throwaways, the discarded, the broken. The fiends scour playgrounds, bus stations, shelters and malls, looking for someone needing a safe place to stay. They then pour on the charm with flattery, attention, and met needs. Its kindness, however, has more insidious goals. The monsters are conditioning them, programming them mentally and emotionally, and sometimes physically abusing or drugging the boys so that it can lead them into the terrible world of child sex trafficking. Rolcock's Spoilt Dove brothel is a living hell for its captured boys. The 10 men assigned to Gregor Lemmeli had all graduated from the espionage school at Altenburg in Thuringia. 2 or 3 of them spoke French well enough to disguise their origins, but the rest sounded as German as a brass band. Lemmel made them comb Paris and the occupied zone for 4 whole months. The least mediocre of these agents, an SS officer named Hess, not Rudolf but Jürgen, was sent to reconnoitre Grenoble in September. The Lamiels were no longer there. They had emigrated to Morocco 6 months earlier. Theirs seemed to have been a precipitate departure. Catherine Lamiel, the 22-year-old girl whom Laemmler had momentarily mistaken for Maria Weber in the Rue Condillac in 1939, had broken off her medical studies just before embarking on her fifth and final year. Laemmler interpreted this sudden exodus as the result of a tactical ploy on Maria Weber's part. She had persuaded the Lamiels to go along with her assumption of Sophie's identity, then she removed them all from circulation before anyone could use them against her. A neat chess player's move. Hess returned from Grenoble, bearing detailed dossiers, complete with photographs on each of the four Lamiels: father, mother, son, and daughter. Of the latter two, rumour had it that the son Frederick and daughter Catherine had left Morocco and were back in France. Another detail on file: Frederick, who was studying architecture, had served with the International Brigades in Spain. The International Brigades were military units set up to organise the volunteer troops who trekked across the Pyrenees to fight for Republican Spain. The brigades existed for 2 years, from 1936 until 1938, when all international volunteers were withdrawn by the Spanish Republic from its forces. How could Laemmler have failed to suspect a connection with the Spanish bodyguards accompanying Maria Weber? The hunt for the Hispano was still in progress at the end of February 1942, under the direction of Jürgen Hess. His inquiries made it seem certain that the sumptuous car seen leaving Biarritz on the morning of August 25, 1939, had neither headed north nor crossed the frontier into Spain. That meant it must have headed east toward what was now the unoccupied zone, where it might still be based. Given that it consumed 50 litres of petrol every 100 kilometres when travelling at full speed, it must, unless it had gone to ground in the region of the Côte Basque, have stopped to refuel somewhere, and what garage attendant, even after an interval of 30 months, would have forgotten that 2.5-ton monster with the black and silver paintwork? Hess's men took their positions on a starting line from Libourne, northeast of Bordeaux, to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port on the Spanish frontier. Each member of his team was assigned a corridor 10 to 15 kilometres wide, extending as far as the Italian border, and each was to conduct a systematic check on all the petrol pumps in the sector, one by one, whether or not they had been out of service since August 1939. The agents crossed their demarcation line on March 2nd. Gregor Laemmler was enchanted by the inexorable neatness of this procedure, except that it yielded nothing, absolutely nothing for all of 16 weeks. Either he'd been mistaken in his belief that the Hispano had headed east after leaving Biarritz, or, and this was the explanation he most readily accepted in his eagerness to conceive of an adversary just as Machiavellian as himself, Maria Weber had prudently established some refuelling depots in advance. The fact remained that by the beginning of May his trackers had reached the Marseille-Saint-Étienne vertical without finding a thing. Laemmler decided to alter his tactics and recruit some reinforcements. If he drew on Gestapo personnel, he would saddle himself with more men of Hess's type, and that prospect didn't appeal to him at all, precisely because Jürgen Hess was no fool and had the effrontery to criticise him, Laemmler, to his face. He hadn't submitted a single report to Berlin for months, and the signs were that Heydrich and Himmler had forgotten his existence. He really couldn't see any point in jogging their memory and be deprived of his pet project. After all, he was still drawing millions and millions of French francs, and no one seemed to care what use he made of them. In an emergency, he could always fall back on his SS rank of Obersturmbannführer and his personally signed orders from Hitler, and with a modicum of persuasion, secure the assistance of an entire division. He accepted a proposal that Gortz had made him in February of the previous year. At a house on the edge of the Bois de Boulogne in Paris, a meeting took place between Laemmler and the director of the German purchasing agencies set up in France by Hermann Göring. The man, Otto Brandl by name, offered him the service of one of his protégés, whom he described as a most exceptional person. Brandl's nominee turned out to be a Frenchman who had recently been granted German nationality and the rank of captain in the Wehrmacht for services rendered, notably the dismantling of a Belgian resistance network. He was tall, massively built, and thoroughly masculine despite his strange falsetto voice. His self-confidence was absolute. He could personally vouch for all the men be supplied, 50 or 100 or even more. Better still, his second-in-command was Pierre Bonny, generally reputed to be the finest detective in France. He discussed terms in a charming and amiable manner. 200,000 francs for the recovery of the car, 2 million for the boy, 10 million for the woman. His name was Henry Lafont, alias Normand. Now that his finest hour had struck, he was known as Monsieur Henri. His offices were in Avenue Pierre-E de Serby, and he had just been given a housewarming party at his new headquarters at 93 Rue Lauriston. Thomas and Javier sprinted along under cover of the pine trees, keeping to the hollows and gullies. The Hispano's hiding place was already 500 or 600 yards behind them, the red villa considerably farther away than that. They passed Miguel, who had flattened himself behind a rocky mound in such a way that only his eyes and the muzzle of his rifle were visible. Miguel withdrew as soon as they went by, and broke into a run to cover their retreat with his finger ready to pull the trigger. No one on earth could shoot faster or straighter than Miguel. Juan Lull was covering their left flank a little farther on. He had just straightened up and was trotting along. None of the bodyguards had uttered a single word yet. They simply exchanged glances or gestures, and that was communication enough. Thomas marvelled at their precision and was filled with pride. They came out on a narrow path hemmed in by holm oaks and thick shrubs. They had to make their way along it without a sound, without brushing against a single leaf. Thomas was no stranger to this procedure, having rehearsed it 2 or 3 times a month for month on end. Once even, Javier had hauled him out of bed in the middle of the night and hustled him mercilessly along. They had followed the same route under the same set of circumstances, with the other 3 armed Spaniards covering their retreat in similar fashion. They trekked west and north in turn, crossed the main road and railway line, and spent the whole day hiding in a shepherd's hut on the slope of the Gros Cerveau, not returning until the following night, and then only after satisfying themselves that it had been a false alarm. It was that first night in the hut with the full moon rising that Thomas first saw them change into their beast forms. However, they tended to him and protected him like a pup. His mother had prepared him for such a change, but it was still something extraordinary to have 4 shapeshifters spending the night with him and after returning him home changing again to prowl the grounds and keep watch. Right now, the full moon was some time away, but his bodyguards were trained soldiers with human abilities that far exceeded those of other men. The path petered out. The main road was in sight. At a signal from Javier, the whole party froze. On previous occasions, Tomeo Oliver had been stationed nearby as a lookout to watch the road and enable them to cross it unobserved. This time he wasn't there. Monsieur Henry's chauffeured white Bentley breasted the rising ground. Moments later, a small bay came into view on their left, a rocky cove adorned with a sandy beach. In his strange falsetto voice, he told Laimler, "The villa is just a little way on the right. They'll all be asleep. It's not yet 6. We weren't absolutely sure it was the right place until last night, when you were already on your way here by train. All the same, we had narrowed it down to one of 2 villas. There's a boy of around 10 or onwards at both places, and they both have tennis courts. But the one child possesses a mother and father on premises. The other boy's name is Thomas, and he's supposed to be the grandson of the caretakers, Joseph and Alphonsine Allegre. They've put it about in Sanary that he's an illegitimate child their daughter Marthe gave birth to on December 14th, 1931, in Courtazon, before her marriage. Her and the husband later disappeared into Algiers. However, the birth record on that child proved to have been of someone else. That would not have been known to us had not a slim boy with an English accent gone up to my investigator in Courtazon and provided him with a different birth record than the one the hospital released. The second birth record, this one signed by a midwife, showed that Martha's child had been stillborn outside the hospital. The Allegri's bastard grandson was born dead and now burns in hell. My priest says no child born out of wedlock may be included among those entering heaven. He concluded, "The final piece of evidence we needed was gained by checking around Sanary. We discovered that Alphonsine Allegre had ordered a cake and gifts for a young boy whose birthday is today, September 18th, 1942. So then, who are they bringing up? It's certainly not the deceased bastard. I guess we'll soon know." Gregor Laimler was seated in the back of the Bentley with Monsieur Henri. Riding beside the driver, Eddie Pagnon was Laimler's personal aide Georg Seuft, a beefy but effeminate-looking young SS officer. As they arrived, a small group of men were standing beside a black van. Gregor Laimler already knew or was soon to know every one of the dozen men and any of their associated nicknames who were involved in the Sannery operation. Apart from Paul Clavy, Monsieur Henri's nephew, they included Loose Hair, Jean-Michel Red-Nosed Chavez, Alphonse Menigot, Charles Cazorba, Abel Gorilla Danos, One-Armed Mohammed Begdane, Bernard Gurley Bonange, Dominique Carbotti, Adrian the Pimp Rollcock, George Kaijian the Armenian, and Alex Villaplana, the former pro soccer player. The Bentley pulled up, and Paul Clavy presented his report. He'd been the first one on the scene, having driven there straight from Nice. Sure enough, after 30 or 40 minutes, a boy had emerged from the house and crossed the terrace. He'd even started down the drive, only to turn on his heel and go inside again. Can't think what he was up to at that ungodly hour. We were watching him from behind the hedge and almost snatched him then and there, but I only had Rollcock with me, and we'd have had to jump the gate first. We feared messing things up. Besides, who knows how many of them are there inside the house? He went on to report that 20 minutes earlier, a team led by the gorilla had set off for the main road beyond the villa. They're bound to be in position by now. Laimler got out of the Bentley, but refrained from slamming the door. He surveyed the red house as closely as its garden wall and dense privet hedge allowed. He was amazed at his own placidity, not to say indifference. The whole operation was doomed to fail, he felt sure, and he almost hoped that it would. Over to his left, Georg Suift of the flaxen hair, girlish face, and bulging muscles had idiotically drawn his Luger and was trailing along behind the varied pimps, thieves, and cutthroats who were on their way to besiege the villa. The man with the yellow eyes thought to himself, would this bunch of repulsive thugs really succeed in capturing her? Mechanically glancing at his watch, Gregor Laimler saw that it was 7 minutes to 6 in the morning on September 18th, 1942. It was 4 minutes since anyone had moved, and 3 since Miguel had gone off to reconnoitre in his silent, stealthy way. You turned your head for a moment, and he wasn't there anymore. Thomas firmly believed that Miguel could have slipped through a bead curtain without displacing a single strand. They waited. Thomas studied Javier's face, trying to read his intentions, but the face was its usual expressionless mask. Many people were as scared of Javier Coll as Grandpa Alegre was, who often complained that the Spaniard sent shivers down his spine. Many people, but not Thomas. Javier spoke little, or at any rate infrequently, and he seldom smiled. His dark eyes were on the wide side, and you felt the weight of his gaze when it rested on you. He was pretty old, 40 at least, thought Thomas, and thin as a rake. But watch out. He could lift 100-pound sack one-handed, as easily as you could do the same with a bag of sweets, and he'd crack you a nut between his thumb and forefinger just like that. He always carried 2 knives, one that lived up his sleeve and sprang open with a click, and the other, a smaller one, in a flat leather sheath strapped to his forearm. By the time you saw his hand move, the knife had gone whistling through the air and embedded itself into the trunk of a pine tree many yards away. Yet Thomas wasn't the least bit of Javier, and anyway, he had his mother's assurance on the subject. Javier is the only person in the world you can trust implicitly, except, of course, with our special secret. Cuidado, whispered Juan Lull. Careful. There was movement on the road. Preceded by the sound of its engine, a car came into view, a black front-wheel drive Citroën van. It was crawling along, and the 2 men in it were closely scrutinising the verges on either side. Then it pulled up. The men got out, looking relaxed but alert. Each of them was carrying a submachine gun. In spite of Javier's heavy hand, which was clamping his head to the ground, Thomas continued to peer through the undergrowth. His memory registered certain details. One of the pair had an arm missing. The other was a barrel-chested giant of a man. He studied their faces, their posture, their walk until they were permanently imprinted on his mind. He would always recognise them from now on. Abel was the big one's name. The one-armed man had just called him that. Abel had jumped the ditch and was heading straight for them. He was 50 yards away at most, and the monumental nature of his physique became more and more apparent with every step he took. An idea popped into Thomas's head unbidden. He hoped that Javier Coll and Abel would fight like dogs. When you owned a dog that was tougher than all the rest, and it came up against another dog, even a bigger one half of you dreaded that they would spring at each other's throats, while the other half yearned for them to do so, because you knew in your heart of hearts that your dog would give the other one a hell of a hiding, or perhaps even kill it. Thomas felt rather ashamed of comparing Javier Cole to a dog, because he liked him a lot, but that was the way he was. If a cruel thought like that popped into his head, he couldn't help carrying it through all the way. In any case, there was no dog fight. Just as the huge man was starting to climb the mound that hid them from view, and had gotten within 30 yards or so, a shot rang out on the left, far away in the Bandol direction. This first shot was swiftly followed by another, then several more, then a whole fireworks display. Miguel or Tomeo, or both of them, must have opened up, and some submachine guns had returned their fire. Abel and his one-armed companion ran back to the van, made a U-turn, and drove off fast the way they'd come. At a nod from Javier, Juan Lull rose to his feet and went down to the road. He crossed it and signalled that the coast was clear. Thomas and Javier swiftly joined him on the other side. They were still striding out briskly 20 minutes later, having crossed the railway line. This time, contrary to Thomas's expectations, they headed northeast instead of making straight for the shepherd's hut. As he trotted along behind Juan, precisely following his zigzag lead, Thomas was saddened, but exhilarated by the certainty that he was leaving for good, that he would never see Grandpa and Grandma Allegri or their stupid mutt again. His young life was about to undergo a vast and sudden transformation. He'd just come to this conclusion when they reached the farm. Gregor Laimler was standing in the middle of the boys' bedroom. He himself had touched nothing. He'd left that to Soeft, whose examination of various cupboards had disclosed the presence of 16 Meccano sets in mint condition, several jigsaw puzzles, some comprising 3,000 or 4,000 pieces. Laimel, himself a great lover of such brain-teasers, immediately noted that they were special puzzles made to order by Symington and Travis of Manchester. And there were enough other games and toys to last a boy for years. Oddly enough, another cupboard was found to contain no less than 10 dozen pairs of espadrilles in assorted sizes. As for books, they were everywhere. Complete collections of masque and adventure stories in the Emeraude series rubbed shoulders with the complete works of Jules Verne, Louis-Henri Boussinart, Karl May, James Curwood, H.G. Wells, and Alexandre Dumas. Kipling, Paul Féval, and Gustave Aimard shared shelves with the adventures of Pistol Pete, Arsène Lupin, Rouletabille, Sherlock Holmes, and Fantomas. Odder still, Francis de Croisset's La Dame de Malakoa and Malraux's La Condition Humaine. At the age of 10, muttered Laimel, raising his eyebrows, and Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms, the Dr. Dolittle novels, pulp fiction like The Shadow and Doc Savage, Greek philosophers, including Plato and Socrates, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, a collection of the Marquis de Sade's sexual libertine works, Machiavelli, which drew a sharp breath from Laimel, Karl von Clausewitz's On War. The atlases were in French, English and German. They numbered at least a dozen and were all superlative quality. A terrible scream rang out downstairs, a woman's scream, all of superlative quality, though their maps were crisscrossed with pencil lines representing imaginary voyages of exploration. Soeft picked up the books one by one and thumbed through the pages, then tossed them unceremoniously on the floor. The hardbacks he slit open with a razor blade to see if their covers concealed anything. Pointless, totally pointless, was Laimler's wry and despondent verdict. In his opinion, there wasn't a hope of finding any document of interest or value, let alone a photograph of Maria Weber. He turned on his heel, unable to endure the sight of books being dismembered in such a barbarous manner, and strolled into the room next door. It was a schoolroom and playroom combined. French, Spanish, German and English grammars stood side by side on a shelf together with dictionaries. A 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle lay spread out on a huge trestle table. It depicted an English cottage garden in full bloom. Nearly half of it, including the border, had been completed. The remainder of the pieces had been carefully sorted according to colour and placed in shoe boxes, very systematic. Laimler was tempted to sit down at the chessboard, where a game was in progress. White had the advantage and ought to win in 5 moves, no 6, unless, well, I'll be damned, he thought. I didn't spot that Black King's knight. What a diabolical trap. He walked out into the passage and opened one door, then another. He knew what lay behind the third before he crossed the threshold. Just as he did so, Another scream floated up from the ground floor. It conveyed even more pain and terror, if that was possible, than the first. The room Laimler entered was still redolent of Maria Weber's perfume, or so he imagined. It was a spacious room whose ultra-elegant decor centred on a four-poster bed draped in a white lace counterpane. Everything was bathed in the dawn light that flooded in through 4 windows overlooking the sea. Studying the ebony furniture more closely, Laimler thought he recognised the style of Paul Tribe and Jacques-Émile Ruhlmann, both interior designers of his acquaintance. He took 3 or 4 steps and stopped short, almost suffocated by the sensation that he wasn't alone. He'd never before been so close to the woman he so desperately sought but had never seen. He could picture her in this very room, picture her relaxing after her duel on the tennis count with Suzanne Lenglen, or burning the midnight oil as she tirelessly updated her residuary trustees' accounts. The woman downstairs had stopped screaming. Her moaning and panting were suggestive of childbirth or copulation, nauseating, whichever. Laimler resumed his progress across the room. He sat down where she had undoubtedly sat, at the superb Mazarin bureau. Satisfied that he wouldn't find anything relevant to his quest in the drawers, he didn't even trouble to open them. His yellow eyes widened as he tried to suppress a little of the potent emotion that possessed him in his now possessing a piece of the woman and the boy. He was still seated at the desk when Georg Soeft came in a few minutes later, having just ransacked the playroom-cum-schoolroom. "Don't touch anything," said Laimler, not bothering to furl his brow. "One could—" Soeft began. "Get out of here," Laimler ordered him with fury verging on hatred. He just had to fully possess Thomas, and then he could fully possess his mother. That's what it all came down to now. Some considerable time after his aide's departure, Laimler tore himself away from the room and went downstairs. Silence had been restored, he noted. The woman was moaning no longer. He discovered the reason for this silence when he paid a visit to the staff quarters at the rear of the villa. The caretaker and his wife and a dog had had their throats cut. Rollcock had decapitated the 3 corpses and made some minor rearrangements. The dog was adorned with the man's head, the woman with the dog's head, and the man with his wife's head. Rollcock looked up from where he was cutting organs out of the woman, which he threw into a big bowl, and said, "Even the old ones make fine sausages." Unmoved, the man with the yellow eyes stepped over their remains and asked if any information had come to light. The answer, it seemed, was yes. Chapter 2. Young Leaders. East Germany, afternoon of August 13th, 1965, from Adorf in the Vogtlandkreis to a forest near Geisingberg abutting the Czech border. Corden's car was nearing the entrance to the young leader's camp. He gripped the wheel tightly as he peered ahead over the rough terrain. His Trabant 601 estate was ideal for his cover. As Gunther Ehrlich, he was a small-time, independent supplier of spare parts for agricultural machinery, working out of Nuremberg. But the stacks of sales literature and boxes of samples, which took up much of the back seat, had made for an uncomfortable fit when it came to squeezing in the free-spirited Jonas and his plump little brother Johann. The small boot compartment was likewise full of items compatible with Corden's cover. Anna sat, rather inelegantly in the front, and whilst the boys dozed, squashed together as they were with Johann's head lolling lightly against Jonas's chest, she talked in a quiet, rather wistful voice about her friendship with Matthias Berg. The journey itself was uneventful, the only serious traffic being encountered as they swung a mere kilometre south of the very Trabant factory at Zwickau, where the car had been manufactured, and again when they hit a tailback of lorries, presumably heading for Dresden. Corden looped east, and by the time they were approaching Geissen, there was the sound of regular light snoring from the back of the car. Neither he nor Anna had spoken for nearly 20 minutes. "I'll stay out of sight," he said, evenly. "You just need to get word to Rudy. Tell him I'm hoping to talk to him about advance orders for the new Forschritt tractor range. Just get him away from Berg. I won't need long. You might need to get away quickly without us." "Yes, I might at that. Will you be okay?" "Yes, of course. We come here often with the boys. They love it here. Matthias might even let them stay for the weekend. Jonas would be thrilled. Johann, less so, I think. He's still a bit young to play with the big boys. Corden looked at her doubtfully as he swung the Trebant through an open gate onto the grounds and killed the engine. They were a good half-kilometre away from the accommodation block. They both looked on in silence as a group of boys in physical education kits appeared momentarily against the tree line, then disappeared again into the woods. Anna turned to her sons Jonas and Johann and began to rouse them gently, but before she had brought them fully awake, there came the sound of quick, rather heavy footsteps from behind the car, and 3 men were suddenly there, one in front, one on either side. "We need you to accompany us, Herr Ehrlich," said one politely. "Please, do not be alarmed. Everything is in order." "Hello again, Frau Wagner," said another. "Rudy is waiting for you inside. It's great you've brought the kids. He's been anxious to see them. Come on, we'll get you some refreshments. We've got hot chocolate." Corden presumed they were the 3 men who had picked Rudy up earlier in the day, Berg's men. The one who seemed to be in charge, the short, stocky one in front, nodded to Corden with a kind of mysterious deference, extending an arm and pointing to indicate that he should exit the car and follow them to the house. He got out of the car extremely carefully. Despite not seeing any weapons on the Stasi agents, he assumed that they were armed, and it was possible that they made the same assumption about him, although he was not. "What's this about?" he asked thickly, determined to keep as far as possible to his agricultural salesman cover. "Please," said the stocky man with a reassuring smile. Anna had got out as well, and had her boys huddled still sleepily against her. Slowly, the small group made its way towards the main building. Corden and 2 of the men ahead, and Anna, Jonas and Johann behind them, followed by the stocky man bringing up the rear. They reached the front entrance just as the pale disk of a waning full moon appeared in the eastern sky. Corden observed the young man opposite him. They were both seated in fine leather armchairs and were facing each other across an expensive oak desk, inlaid with panels of a darker wood, its edges heavily scrolled. Both desk and chairs seemed to recall an earlier century. Old paintings of boys in various stages of dress and play hung on the walls. All were definitely out of place in the otherwise drab and functional office with its worn oatmeal carpet and regulation filing cabinets. A record player sat on a long trestle table to the side. A young attendant, a rather pretty, skinny, blonde-haired, effeminate boy in a young leader's uniform and with lips adorned in pink lipstick, long pink fingernails too, strolled into the room, gave a nod to the young man, then walked over to a record player where he placed the needle on a record and adjusted the volume. "Kind im Einschlummen," child falling asleep, Kindersehnen op. 15 began softly playing. The attendant quietly slipped out of the room. "Kindersehnen," declared the young man Ehrlich Corden had been brought to see. "In English," he continued, "you like Schumann. Scenes from childhood, I think is how you would say, no?" Schumann had composed the collection of short piano pieces about young boys. His scenes from childhood, Kindersehnen, were the composer's reflections of childhood conditions, such as sleeping, lying alluringly by the fireside, riding a hobby horse, and all the connotations that arouses, and being frightened. It was written about children, but not made for children. More so, especially when played by a child, the music was to lure adults into the child's world. Every child who learns to play the pieces thinks he's gotten a vision into the world of Schumann, but in the hands of a virtuoso, the role of rubato, a slight speeding up and slowing down of the tempo, gives a much more dreamlike and erotic quality to the work. He peered at Corden and nodded along in appreciation for a few seconds. The pianist Dieter Zecklin is one of our great artists, I think. Sadly, underappreciated in the West. The recorded music we're listening to was performed when Zecklin was 12 in 1938, a very, very rare find. Obviously it's included in his adult recordings. Those are easy to come by. This one? Not so much. Corden looked blankly ahead. The young man did not reveal to his visitor that the boy Dieter was sitting naked on the piano bench playing the piece some 30 years ago in Goslar, Germany, while white-eyed and in a trance, just having been bedded and ruined by the demon now talking to Corden. The boy had bargained for great talent and received it, but the cost he paid was his virginity and a damned soul. "You will join me in coffee?" the young man inquired earnestly, suddenly more animated. It's the real thing. I have it brought over specially from Paris." Without waiting to be asked, he lifted a modest coffee pot and poured Corden a small measure into a delicate cup, replenishing his own afterwards in the manner of a considerate host entertaining a house guest. "Help yourself to the milk and sugar." He gestured generously to the small spread of items which lay between them. Corden didn't reply or make any move to help himself to anything. "I expect you are wondering why I've asked to see you," said the young man. He had a pleasant, intelligent face, narrow and slightly serious. His light brown hair had been allowed to grow out somewhat, but it still looked like a military cut. He was smartly dressed in an elegant green jacket and a crisp, white shirt with a tightly knotted tie that also reflected evidence of military service. There was a discreet Communist Party badge pinned to the lapel of his jacket. "I was," answered Corden bluntly. "First of all, who the hell are you?" The young man paused, almost wincing, as if a long-awaited, long-anticipated moment, fraught with potential difficulty, could no longer be put off. He smiled, thinly, but with some genuine enthusiasm. "I think you know perfectly well who I am, as I know perfectly well who you are." Corden remained silent. He didn't see why he should make things any easier. "We are both of us in a very delicate situation," he continued smoothly. "I appreciate that. I can respect that. Respect your professional sensibilities. As you know, I'm sure, my name is Matthias Berg. You know my position. You know who I work for. I, in turn, know full well who you work for, Herr Ehrlich. But please bear with me. You see, your present predicament is not my concern here. I do not need to know any more about you or your activities, and once we have completed our discussion, you will be free to go, free to return to Nuremberg or Berlin, as you choose, or to London, or wherever." He paused and scrutinized Corden's face for reaction, but evidently saw nothing there but the faint flush of hostility and a slight puzzlement. "I give you my word, as a gentleman." Seeing no reaction, he added in a more lively, expressive tone, "All right then, if you prefer, as a friend of Anna's and Rudy's, a potential friend of yours actually, if you like, a useful friend to have." Corden still said nothing. Neither did he reach forward for the coffee. Berg leaned back and took a sip from his own cup, as if in encouragement. "Yes, it is really rather good. Are you sure you won't try some? It's far superior to what you will be used to over here." Seeing that he was getting nowhere, the young man straightened up slightly and adopted a more businesslike pose. "I've been tracking you for some time, you know. Your clandestine activities with Rudy I've followed with great interest. You're rather good, I'd say. Yes, a highly accomplished agent. Somewhat wasted, I would have thought, on the little tidbits that Rudy feeds you on. Rather starved, actually. Anyway, I pulled Rudy in the other week and showed him the file I have on him. He was quite put out, poor chap. Quite frightened, actually. Rudy's espionage activities with you. Photographs of his 12-year-old son Jonas frolicking in the nude with older boys when he was attending our Young Communist League gatherings, while under the pretences of visiting school friends in Adorf. Jonas naked on a rug beside a fireplace, with a masked man taking his innocence. I so enjoyed my evening with the boy. Obviously my face had to be hidden out of necessity. It's quite a charge sheet. The immoralities of a wayward son, the father fraternizing with anti-democratic elements, reactionary forces, foreign counter-revolutionaries. That's you, by the way. So, when I instructed Rudy to call you to arrange an urgent meeting at his farm, well, naturally he did so. He had no choice. Of course, I had my colleagues pick him up before that meeting could take place. Corden was staring hard at the young man now, feeling rather the fool for being outplayed in his craft and embarrassed at hearing of Jonas's activities. I can assure you, however, that Rudy did not give you up. He has not been indiscreet, nor has he incriminated you in any way. I suppose it must have crossed your mind. As I said, I've been aware of your activities for a number of months. Why didn't you just have me picked up at the farm? You could have arrested the pair of us. Berg actually smiled at this. I really couldn't, he said finally. That would have been too obvious. Too much like a show. No, it was far better to lure you out here where we can talk without the need for such dramatics. I prefer to do my work away from the spotlight. Corden had been listening carefully, his mind churning. A faintly stupid look spread across his face as an idea took shape. My God, he declared suddenly. This operation has not been sanctioned by the East German Communist Party, has it? You're running this off-book, aren't you? A little bit of private enterprise, using the cover of training boys to become young leaders, while fucking them among the trees and schooling them to be your puppets, sexual and otherwise. All while their parents believe you, the sainted Matthias Berg, rising star of the Communist Party, has everyone's best interests at heart. Berg looked away as if distracted. He seemed momentarily lost in the Schumann, now at number 8. Am came in, by the fireside, reminding him of Jonas's appreciative moans as their secret agreed-upon bargain was sealed with the boys deflowering by Berg while in his demon form, 5 months ago. Eventually, he reached down and removed a large manila folder from the right-hand drawer of the desk and placed it squarely on the ink blotter between them. He drew out a 4x6-inch photograph and pushed it towards Corden. It wasn't of Jonas's sexual escapades with the young leaders or any of the older men he'd been charged to seduce on Berg's behalf. You will recognise this man, of course. The photo was a formal portrait of a middle-aged man in a major's uniform. He stood ramrod straight and stared out beyond the camera with an intense, puzzling look that was hard to decipher. "Why would I?" answered Corden belligerently. Berg ignored the question and began talking, almost intimately, as if speculating out loud, but with a degree of discretion still as to any conclusion. "Hans Becker, my esteemed colleague in the Stasi, you have, I think, been very interested in him for a long time. Not yourself, maybe, not you personally, but the people you represent. Those certain parties in London, the MI6, are very interested, I know, in getting a closer look at Hans Becker, having a relationship with him. I know he has been approached in most secret ways. I have my ears to the ground, you know. I can recognise the sound a pig makes as it hunts for truffles, and Hans Becker would be a prize truffle indeed." Corden was lost in thought. When he came to himself, the record on the turntable had ended, and all he could hear was the repetitive scratching of the needle in the final groove of the disc as it continued to spin round aimlessly. "What is it you want, Berg?" He was aware that this was the first time he had uttered the younger man's name and recognised the significance of the moment. Berg regarded him quietly for a few seconds, and then wordlessly withdrew some larger photographs from the folder. Corden saw their graininess, the slight blurring of the image and the unusual angle from which they had been shot, and straight away knew that they were taken without the knowledge of Becker. He studied them one by one for some minutes. Each image showed the middle-aged man with Jonas. Both of them were naked, and each picture was sexually explicit in a different way. The man, despite the poor quality of the photographs, was, without doubt, Hans Becker. He was caught in profile, the craggy features unmistakable, as he thrust an erect penis towards the boy who knelt before him. In another, he had his back to the camera, which must have been secreted high up in a room above, and was pounding the lad, who had propped himself on a tiled surface and embraced Becker with arms and legs opening himself up. Becker's face was caught in a twisted, orgasmic grimace in a mirror behind the boy who, himself, seemed to be screaming or panting open-mouthed, a wild, rather joyful, glazed look on his face as he abandoned himself to being penetrated. The setting seemed to be some kind of changing room, a bathroom maybe. Wash basins could be seen as well as the mirrors and tiled surfaces. "You caused Jonas to do these things?" asked Corden eventually, his voice even and carefully controlled. Berg was silent a moment longer. "The boy doesn't matter." "Doesn't he now?" exclaimed Corden, suddenly angry. "Jonas can be left out of it. I want that. He does my bidding very well. Does all I ask him to do with any man I ask him to do it with. It's Becker I want to be embarrassed. I need him to be effectively neutralised. His power, I mean. He has become a serious impediment to my progress and now has gone too far. He's actively having my early background investigated over some nonsense personal stuff, but it would damage me, damage my prospects with the young leaders, you understand? He desires to command the boys who have aligned with me here. So, what do you propose? You could have these photos slipped out to the right people. You'd damage Becker far more than he can damage you." Berg sniffed slightly and rose. He moved to the record player and lifted the arm off the still-turning record. "That is not the case, I'm afraid. Right now, he has far more influence than I can muster. Really, I can't be seen as the one to bring him down. Everyone knows he is my main rival, but if your people were to have these photographs in your possession, you could easily use them against him." Blackmail him, cried Corden with contempt. To finish him. What I'm saying is that your interest in Becca is misplaced. In 5 years' time, maybe 6 or 7, but soon, I will be in a far stronger position. I am suggesting that you have backed the wrong horse if you really think that Becca represents the future of the Communist Party in Eastern Germany. It is I, myself, that represents the future. It is me you should be talking to, not Becca. Corden looked slightly stunned. Are you offering yourself as an agent? Offering to turn? Berg swiveled quickly towards Corden, a look of anguish on his face. Don't be ridiculous, he exclaimed. I'm merely pointing out that in the not-too-distant future, it will be in our mutual interest to have an understanding. The Cold War will not last. It has maybe a quarter of a century life left within it. There will be a thaw in our relations. The wall will fall. German reunification will happen. The Soviet bloc will fall apart. That is my analysis, and when that happens, it will be me you want to be dealing with, not the likes of Hans Becker. I want you to arrange for these photographs to land on the desk of my superiors in Berlin in a way that keeps me out of it. Let it be known that the source is British intelligence. They'll believe that. With any luck, they will have Becker shot. Corden was again deep in thought. You know, he said carefully, London might not agree. They might just go back to Becker with these and wave them under his nose. Come and work for us, Hans, or else. I wouldn't put it past them. We could have him eating out of our hands. They would be stupid to think so, said Berg with a dismissive chop of his arm through the air. You should tell them that. Tell them to forget about Becker. Think of the future, the long term. Tell them it is the right strategic move. Why me? Asked Corden eventually. For the first time, Berg hesitated and seemed to really contemplate his answer. Convenience, he said simply. Your connection to Rudy and to Anna, of course. And I admire you. I admire your work. And I need you. By myself, I have not sufficient power to bring down Becker. But you with the whole weight of British intelligence behind you, you could make it happen in a way I simply could not. It is a question of opportunity. You'd give him up, despite what he means to the Stasi. In an instant, the future is at stake. Don't play the innocent with me, Berg, said Corden hotly. We make this play and all your problems with Becker go away. We do your dirty work for you and your path is clear. No Becker, no investigation, no black mark on your record. Berg seemed stung by this outburst. He pursed his lips primly and turned to face Corden. Yes, he admitted, it is true that I shall be the main beneficiary for now. But I urge you to think of the future. Think of what progress could be made once I am established in a position of greater authority. Is it not worth the risk? Berg left the question hanging in the air, took a deep breath, and buttoned his jacket. When were these taken? Where? How did you get hold of them? You do not need to know, replied Berg sharply. London will ask. I'll need some details if I'm to convince them. Berg contemplated this, seeming to weigh in his mind the merit of Corden's argument. They were taken here, actually, about 2 weeks ago. He stopped speaking and busied himself with removing some fluff from his lapel with a fluttering motion of his hand. Corden frowned and gave Berg a slightly sideways look. You set this whole thing up, didn't you? Did you tell Jonas to come on to Becker when he went into the toilet? Is that the type of thing you do with him? Pimp him out on the side, when you're not fucking him, and while Rudy and Anna believe him to be staying with his friends? Corden had become unreasonably agitated. Finally, he settled back in the armchair, aware of the fatuousness of his outburst. Again, Berg seemed to be slightly offended, but made as if he were prepared to overlook Corden's remarks for the sake of keeping the peace. You took those pictures yourself, didn't you? Said Corden wearily. You watched them at it and then click, click, click. Was it through a two-way mirror? Is this entire place rigged so that you can secretly record everything? Berg drew himself up, as if to make an official declaration. Please excuse me, Herr Ehrlich. I must leave you alone for a few moments. When I return, if the photographs are still on the table, I will take it that you have declined my offer. So be it. You will then be free to leave. He made a little formal bow. I will not have you followed, he added as an afterthought. Your word as a gentleman, I suppose, said Corden with a bitter laugh. Berg simply gave his thin, unfathomable smile and exited the room. When he returned some minutes later, the folder of photographs was gone. Whilst Corden was listening to Berg lay out his proposals, Rudy had been waiting for Anna on the top floor of the building, in what looked like a classroom. They had embraced quickly, and Rudy made a big fuss of his children, both of whom had fully woken up by now. His hug of Jonas was now saddled with having seen photographs of his son fornicating with men without abandon on rugs, in the back seat of a car, in a toilet, and even in his very own home. The boy was still his beloved son, always free-spirited, yes, but never before so obsessed, possessed, whatever it was that had taken hold within him. One of the men who had accompanied them from the car and led them upstairs had disappeared for a few moments. Rudy thought this was out of consideration for the privacy of the family's reunion, but the man then proceeded to throw open the shutters of a serving hatch, behind which he had prepared a saucepan of rich, hot chocolate for them all to share, even though it was only the boys who actually wanted any when it came to be offered. Anna stroked Rudy's face with a finger whilst he looked awkward and tongue-tied. "Hey kids, I need to talk to your mother. Go and play. Go and explore. We'll stay up here." He turned, uncertainly, to the man in the kitchenette. "That's all right, isn't it? The boys are free to roam about. They usually go and play outside when we are here." "Yeah, that's fine," said the man. "Well, go on then, scram!" urged Rudy at his sons. They turned and charged out. "Jonas, you stay with your brother and avoid any men you come across." Blushing but defiant, Jonas looked into his mortal sire's eyes, knowing full well that his demon sire had shown Daddy the photographs of him pleasuring men. Becca had hardly been the only one. When they came for his father, Jonas had been told by one of the Stasi agents what was to occur, so he'd known that morning his father would be viewing his debaucheries. The boy was happy his secrets were out and that he wouldn't have to lie to his parents about his whereabouts when he was beckoned to the demon's side. Lord Belil's servant did all he was instructed to do, and did so eagerly wanting to please his true master, the one who now owned his soul and fueled him with perversion, the one who had been granted powers by the demon to seduce any man he chose. Rudy faced Anna again and shrugged his shoulders mightily, a gesture that she took to be his way of apologizing to her for being such an idiot, for ever getting himself involved in the murky, uncertain world that Corden had drawn him into, for underestimating her friend Berg, and for putting her to such trouble, dragging her and the kids out here, with all the attendant worry and concern as to his whereabouts, his safety, and her own, ultimately. He would later tell his wife about what their son had been up to. Eventually, Corden appeared, his interview with Berg having concluded. He shook Rudy by the hand, rather ruefully, although relieved to see him looking relatively cheerful under what were, after all, very stressful circumstances. In fact, Rudy was somewhat offhand and cool towards Corden, not entirely sure that he was totally in the clear in regard to his setting up of his now former handler. Corden, however, was realistic about such things and accepted that Rudy never had a choice in the matter, especially with Jonas's involvement. With Berg fully aware of their activities and capturing photos of the preteen with men to use as leverage against Rudy and other targets, there was no longer any question of Rudy providing new material in the future. Compromised as he was, his usefulness to MI6 was at an end. It was probably the end of the road for them all, he realised. Corden proposed that he drive Rudy back to Adolf, debriefing him on the way. They couldn't all fit in one car, and Corden wanted to have Rudy alone in any case, so Berg had to arrange for one of his men to drive Anna and the children back. Jonas seemed keen to stay at the retreat, and became grumpy upon finding he'd have to go home. Yet the boy was not yet ready to test his father this early. He had wanted to stay the weekend and engage with the young leaders, hoping to find the boy named Pooh he'd met there in late July. However, the revelations were way too fresh in Rudy's mind, so it was best to end the day with a little normalcy. They arrived at the farm near midnight, not long after Corden and Rudy, the boys mostly having dozed all the way. By the time they had been put to bed, it was too late for Corden to head on to Nuremberg, and Anna had insisted that he stay the night with them, stay a couple of days perhaps. And so, with blankets and a lamp, he made his way to the small barn, quickly setting himself in a corner perfectly comfortable. Before he slept, he took the photographs of Major Hans Becker and Jonas from his overalls and studied them once more, his eyes, his mind drawn ever to the lad. Eventually, Corden replaced the photographs but could not free himself from the lure of the images. He lay there thinking about Jonas, until finally he drifted off. His sleep was consumed with vivid dreams of Jonas and Johann bathing together, and then one of Jonas crouching nude at the barn door, with his eyes glowing red and breathing deeply. "Lie with me!" Chapter 3. Devil Boy. During the fall of 1952, while West Germany refused Soviet leader Joseph Stalin's proposal to be reunified with East Germany, a short, stout incubus named Iselat, who served Lord Beilil, and a female succubus named Micheli, began making nightly visits to newlyweds, Rudy and Anna's country home near Adorf. The two demons were in the home by Anna's invitation. As Rudy copulated with the female succubus in his dreams, the male incubus and the witch Anna would mate beside the man. After a fortnight, the demon's carried seed fertilized a human egg. Demons are incapable of reproduction. To beget a child is the restricted outcome favored upon non-demons, but devils cannot bestow life upon the bodies they assume, because life formally proceeds only from the soul, and the act of generation is the act of the physical organs which have bodily life. Therefore, bodies which are assumed in this way cannot either beget or bear. Because of this inability to create or nurture life, the method of the creation of a demon-human hybrid is necessarily protracted. A succubus like Micheli will have sex with a human male and so acquire a sample of his sperm. This she will then pass on to an incubus like Iselat. The incubus will, in his turn, transfer the sperm to a human female and thus impregnate her. In simple terms, Rudy was the sperm donor to Micheli's cup, and Iselat the turkey baster, used to pass the seed to Anna. It was different with Pooh and Sugar Baby. In the Candyman's realm, the imp was a raised demidemon, so he wasn't a true incubus, just one in honorarium, name, action and ability. His soul had once inhabited a mortal human with the reproductive organs of a male. The trans boy, Sugar Baby, had the reproductive parts of a female when living on the mortal plane. The Isle's souls were permeable, in that they could change into whatever sex or gender they wanted to assume, but to create life meant that two souls had to have once been capable of begetting life. Thus, Pooh and Sugar Baby met the rare conditions required to procreate with each other. Pooh's seed, formulated during his transitions from prepubescence to puberty and mortal to immortal, found purchase within Sugar Baby without the need for a third-party intervention. Little did Pooh know at the time, but the rarity of the successful impregnation of Sugar Baby would draw much demon scrutiny and jealousy. Anna's hybrid pregnancy was old school. Jonas was born a cambion, the half-human offspring of a demon and a human. Although Rudy's seed had begun human, it had passed between two demons, who left their evil imprints on it. Mortal sire or not, the boy was to be born a half-demon, a demidemon, a cambion, already possessed. Cambion's root meaning is to exchange, the exchanging of seed, or the exchanging of a mortal baby with a demonic one, as that happens too. Among their own kind, the cambions refer to each other as camp. At the young leader's camp, Jonas had already been initiated into the secret society Sons of Incubi Demons, whose members were all cams, as were the Stasi agents working for Matthias Berg. When raising her devil child, Anna was selfish with her firstborn, allowing no one, not even Rudy, to hold the baby. For if they had gotten too close, they'd discovered that the pale infant had no pulse and no breath. This continued until Jonas was about 7 years old, when he learned how to simulate the human act of breathing. By that time, the cambion was devilishly cunning and angelically beautiful, able to persuade many individuals to do his bidding, such as when he'd have a friend's parents tell Rudy his son would be doing a sleepover with their son in Adorf, when Jonas was in fact going to the young leader's camp to engage in the sinister rituals of the Sons of Incubi Demons and to do Lord Beilil's bidding by the fireside, or in ensnaring a target. After his own fireside seeding by Lord Beilil earlier in the year, Jonas was imbued with even stronger powers of seduction, to where no man could now refuse the cambions. Request to mate, not saint nor sinner. Those seedings by the demon lord continue and have manifested into even more demonic behaviours by Jonas. He was quickly leaving the fledgling Demidemon stage behind and becoming a mature Dark One, far excelling past the older cams around him. Lord Bylil was very proud of the incubus spawn grown into his lover. Jonas enjoys pain. He enjoys being spanked. He enjoys the humiliation he feels when Anna makes him drop his trousers for a switching and undress in front of her for a bath. He enjoys slipping into homes around Adolf to steal trinkets and suck at the breasts of sleeping nursing mothers. He enjoys crawling into bed with sleeping men and using his hands to invoke nocturnal emissions. These things are of both nature and nurture. The nature of being demon offspring and the nurture of being raised by a demon-serving witch had created a very powerful devil boy, and Jonas was just getting started. Anna was now teaching him how to conjure spirits and invoke curses. He was highly anticipating learning how to levitate. Anna, born on October 31st, 1930, was the free-spirited child of a Romani witch and unknown father. She grew up in Krakow, Poland, as Hitler took power. The Nazis viewed Romani people as racially inferior and as social outsiders. During World War II, the fascists and their allies and collaborators perpetrated a genocide of European Roma. They shot tens of thousands of Romani people in occupied eastern Poland, the Soviet Union, and Serbia. They also murdered thousands more Roma from Western and Central Europe in killing centres and ghetto districts. Similar was the fate of Anna, her 13-year-old brother Danyor, and her mother Kezia Holland. In the autumn of 1941, when Anna was about to turn 11, they were captured and taken to a segregated area of the Jewish ghetto in Lodz, just to the southwest of Warsaw. The atrocious living conditions and an outbreak of a typhus epidemic took the life of Kezia first, who was already in a diminished state after being repeatedly raped by soldiers during her journey from Krakow. The typhus was traced as to having originated with Danyor, who was known to be selling his young body to men in the ghetto for food rations. Although raised to be a pickpocket, the boy found nothing worth stealing in Lodz. He turned to enticing men into coupling in dark allies, so he could take home food to Kasia and his little sister Anna. He had recently been seen with an effeminate boy with pink lips, who no one else seemed to know. Everyone agreed the two must have been the queer ones spreading the disease. The superstitious Romani men, including those who had availed themselves of the boy's tender body, savagely beat Danyor to death in hopes of exorcising the typhus devastating their community. In an attempt to escape the miserable living conditions and the fate of her mother and brother, hungry little Anna used conjurings taught to her by her mother. The demon who answered her invocations was Lord Bylil. For a rotten potato and a scrap of bread, Anna relinquished her soul to Lord Bylil, who bed her then led her to escape. She has been faithfully serving him for now on 24 years, even to the point of giving the demon her firstborn. Since his birth, she'd been preparing Jonas to serve the Dark One in any manner Lord Bylil chose. Rudy thought he'd have to break everything to his wife, but she was part of it all along. She'd even orchestrated Jonas getting nude with Johann to bathe to further fuel the dark thoughts seeded into Corden's mind by her eldest child. In the early hours of August 14th, 1965, while the demidemon Jonas and the British spy copulated in the barn, Anna was situated nearby taking photographs as Lord Bylil stood next to her. Corden was in frenzied state, savaging the boy while made to feel it was all a dream. With the devil boy Jonas completely in his service and gifted with the ability to seduce any man, Lord Bylil would be gaining leverage against a great many Eastern German communists, as well as some of the spies within British intelligence. The imp listened closely to the report from the Warm Springs Apache Naish. He'd successfully seen to the ruin of Robert Strauss at the young leader's camp. He just needed to be killed and brought to the Isle. However, upon approaching the other assigned target, Jonas, the agent discovered the boy was already corrupted and smelled of demon blood, so the inexperienced Naichi misted back to base for help. After questioning the Apache, Pooh quickly misted to the young leader's camp and found Jonas naked and in the embrace of 3 older boys who were passing him back and forth. He waited until they were done and approached Jonas. Sure enough, Jonas had the scent of demons already on him. Instantly Pooh sensed out the Cambion blood inside him. The imp also saw that Jonas could be a dangerous adversary one day. He realised his plans to ruin Jonas were destroyed. The child was an untouchable already in the service of Lord Bylil, who he'd known for centuries and often found himself in competition with. The young leader's camp had basically become a demon's playground for adolescent boys, and on occasion younger ones like Jonas, with all put into the service of their Dark Lord Master. Many of the youthful communists had already been turned, while others were being groomed towards that goal. The imp discovered that there was even a secret society for half-demons. Lord Bylil was building himself quite the army, and doing so under everyone's noses, including Pooh's. It happens, the Swarm, the Crusaders, even Pooh was doing the same. Returning to the tower, Pooh began hatching a plan that required some give and take between him and his opposition. Mostly, Pooh would see to it that he gave less and gained more. 2 weeks later, the imp marched into Matthias Berg's office, shoving a Stasi agent's face into the door to open it, causing the man to shriek as bones shattered in his face. In his human form, Lord Bylil had been showing a man some dirty pictures for the second time. This time, there were even more photos of his son Jonas conjoining with men. Pooh roughly pushed the man looking at the photos with not arousal but despair aside and stared directly into Berg's eyes. "We need to talk." "Well, if it isn't my dear, dear Pooh, what a delight to see you again," Berg cooed. "Bruno, please escort Rudy out while I catch up with an old friend, and help Otto to the infirmary." A pact was about to be made outside of the usual place of Rollcock's Spoilt Dove's brothel. In case things went bad, Pooh wanted to be able to kill anyone that got in his way, something that wasn't allowed at Rollcock's. Fortunately, the communist agents only experienced a little of the imp's wrath. It was agreed that Pooh would not interfere with the camp, were he given a certain boy named Robert Strauss. Berg called for the timid 14-year-old who had spent his short life being physically abused by his father and had been molested by one of the older leaders. Looking like a frightened rabbit, Robert was retrieved from the dorms and escorted to the office by a Stasi agent. The demon lord reached into a desk drawer and pulled out a Luger, which he handed to Pooh. "Please, take him deep into the woods," requested Berg. Jonas would be sent home that weekend, so that he would not encounter Pooh again, and he could focus on getting Corden into a compromising position. The Cambion had been planting lustful thoughts into the British spy's head since he showed up looking for Rudy, while at the same time treating him with disinterest and hostility. He knew that part of the seduction process was letting a man's ego think he was the one in charge, when in fact Jonas was pulling the strings. Pooh told his old friend he wanted to hang around for a few days and entertain himself with the young leaders. Unsaid to Berg was that the imp wanted to study the ancient and quite experienced demon's training facility to harvest any ideas he could use for his own training facility on the Isle. And he wanted to find the camp's weak spots. After walking the frightened Robert Strauss deep into the woods, Pooh looked at the boy and said, "Look at the flowers." He returned to Berg's office, where the disguised demon lord was now meeting with Corden. He thought to himself, spy versus spy. This be damned James Bond 00 bullshit is too much. Pooh walked over to a record player and poured through the small stack of records, hoping to find Thunderball as sung by Tom Jones. No such luck, but he did see Berg had Kind im Einschlummern, Child Falling Asleep, Kindersennen op. 15, so shrugged and put it on. He walked out into the hall to mist with Berg's Luger still stuck in the back pocket of the blood-stained young leader's uniform he was wearing. Upon entering the tower, he saw Robert Strauss cowering next to Agent Plague, the former Daniel Holland Anna's older brother. "Weren't those flowers pretty?" the imp chanted. Then he began to sing. He always runs while others walk. He acts while other men just talk. They call him the winner who takes all, and he strikes like Thunderball. Chapter 4. Pooh Candy. That's me, I'm the Candy.
Wanna taste the pain? I think I'm seeing all red. 2 bullets in the gun, 1 shot to the head. I need a blank space, 'cause everything is a threat. But I never back down, man, I'd rather be dead. I'm making love to fate. And she looked better in bed, and I'ma rock this
After checking on the tower, castle, barracks and grounds to ensure all was in order, Pooh began preparing for his quick return to the young leader's camp, or lair as he now considered it, where Lord Bylil was expecting him for the weekend. Part of his plan was to take full stock of the place, but he was also plotting to seduce Lord Bylil into an affair, and not with its Matthiasberg guise. He needed the demon in a form where he could exploit its primal nature. Human forms bring with it human behaviours and some inhibitions, while a demonic form was more primal, making it more susceptible to appeasing its outrageous appetites. He wanted to get closer to it, spend lots of time with it, as this was going to be a long-term project. Getting the demon's guard down would require getting its pants down too. The master of boy and cambion manipulation had its own carnal weaknesses, something Pooh had learned long ago in Babylon, where he discovered Lord Bylil's arrogance in coveting a piece of Candyman's sweet piece. Pooh. As were all the demon lords, Lord Bylil was aware that Candyman was in a diminished state. The Dark Ones were lying in wait, biding their time to pounce on the isle and take spoils. At this point, only the pink mist was holding them at bay. It was no secret that the Candyman held Pooh as his prize possession, so Lord Bylil could be manipulated with that. Let the beast think Pooh was ready to jump ship and find a new master to serve. However, at this point the imp was not sure if it was Lord Bylil or Jonas who was guiding their own fireside couplings. Pooh saw something darkly strong within the lad, even stronger than one would typically see within a cambion. During their brief encounter 2 weeks ago, Jonas had tried to impart desire in the imp's mind. It was all Pooh could do to keep himself from submitting and becoming the son of the incubi's bitch. He had to draw the pink mist to surround him and shield him from Jonas's mental manipulations. The boy backed down as Pooh was reaching for a pellet bomb to blow the cambion to smithereens. This new adversary was not yet as strong as Pooh, but could be one day. Jonas would be a challenge. Pooh had to consider the possibility that Lord Bylil was Jonas's bitch, and not the other way around, just as he was making Candyman. Lord Bylil always fucking by the fire, that one, as if just the boy heat wasn't enough to warm his old bones, the imp thought. Pooh had been a young agent, barely 100, and not yet elevated to Demidemon status, when he found the vulnerable spots within the old beast Bylil. Jonas could very well be playing the same game, a game Pooh was about to play again. For all his brilliance, Lord Bylil was an absolute idiot. All you had to do was wiggle your ass and it'd be on you like a horny dog. Sex and heat were the keys here. The mortal plane wasn't as warm as hell. Build a roaring fire which the cold demon would approach, slowly strip down for it, put your warm body against it, and Lord Bylil's bliss made the evil being ignorant to everything else going on around it. While Pooh kept the demon distracted, his agents would be stealthily infiltrating the young leader's lair. Agent Honeysuckle had prepared his papers, which he'd sneak into the office and then appear Saturday as a new recruit. In masquerade, Honeysuckle was going to be planted there on the weekends for the entirety of the operation, which could be months. Honeysuckle, whose real name was Israel Kalev Kaplan, had only been taken by Pooh 9 years ago during his and the Battle Boys' assault on the Angolan demon Kishi's gang of child traffickers at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas on August 3, 2014. Israel and several other boys were being pimped out of a penthouse suite on the Strip. That was in direct violation of the modern turf treaty. The City of Sin was Candyman's playground. Kishi was bound to Chicago. Pooh and his strike force were sent in to shut the poaching operation down. During the fight, Kishi had gotten to Pooh's rear and was about to lodge a spear in his back when Israel threw himself at the demon, sending them over the balcony and dropping them down 29 floors. Kishi Blue misted before hitting the ground, but Israel went splat. In appreciation for his act of valour and turning on his master, Pooh took the boy to the Isle, where Israel would become Agent Honeysuckle, crafter of masquerade and bane of child sex traffickers everywhere. The spy's long-term penetration of the lair shouldn't be a problem. There would be an entire task force backing Pooh and Honeysuckle, plus a strike force. Pooh began removing the pink mist-charged particles on his nails and lips. He replaced the deadly polish and lipstick with flamingo pink Daydreamer nail polish and Runway Rogue Catwalk pastel pink lipstick. The imp would be getting intimate with the demon lord and did not yet want to poison him, so certain weapons had to be left in the tower. "There, getting all prettied up," chanted Pooh as he pulled up a pair of pink panties from Bella Lily. The word baby girl was stenciled on the back of the panties in glittery silver. Atop the intimate wear, he donned a freshly cleaned young leader's uniform, handed to him by tower servants King Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, known in the tower as Hallboy 1 and Hallboy 2. My, these shorts are sure tight, aren't they? The old fiend sure likes to candy up his Twinkies. Am I showing any lines? Hallboy 1? You look splendid, sire, responded Hallboy 1. He would still be armed, as would his team. They had pouches of pellet bombs made of pink mist particles and silver hidden on them, a tug on a watch, and they had a garrote for sneak kills. Packets of what was disguised as boy butter lube were an incendiary paste that could blow down a fortified wall or knock a demon on its ass. Their boots and Pooh's stilettos all were equipped with fugu-coated blades that would take down any mortal man. A quick thought would have the blades spring from the toe of the footwear to be used as kicking daggers. The fugu poison was derived from the sex, organs of the Japanese pufferfish laden with tetrodotoxin bacteria. It hit hard and fast. When pierced, humans would die, but it would just stun a dark dweller for a few seconds, which is still an advantage. Pooh's armourer had to quickly implant the daggers into the boots the imp would be wearing on the mission in lieu of his beloved stilettos. The armourer, Tinker, knew how to make a lot more than the exploding fembombs that were his pride and joy. He got the idea of dagger shoes from reading Ian Fleming's 1957 novel, From Russia, with Love. He fancied himself Pooh's personal Q. Of course, like Pooh's bodysuit, all their uniforms and disguises were fashioned from the Papaver somniferum, opium poppy. The supernatural processing of the fabric using pink mist particles made it nearly indestructible and suited for time travel and fighting. He'd keep Lord Bylil busy while his agents discreetly spied on the young leaders and their camp. As long as the agents avoided very close proximity to the Cambions, where they might be sensed, there shouldn't be a problem. With the full mortal boys, they could get as close as they wanted and ply them with innocent questions upon seducing them. If they presented a problem, a snapped neck or a fiery packet of boy butter put between their cheeks would set them right. The imp summoned agents Naishi, Splash, Honeysuckle, Bang Bang and Thrill. He considered adding Agent Boom Boom to his team, then decided planting explosives around the lair could wait for now. The first three were going with him to the camp in 1965. The latter two were assigned to go to 2011 and watch a trio of Damien's swarmies, who were after the Bentham boy in Albuquerque. They were only to interfere if Bentham's life was on the line. If they found out how the swarmies were connected to the end times Millerite cult, all the better. Although the swarm were not yet too much of a threat, Pooh wanted his agents to monitor Damien's growing horde. Candyman's weakening was raising ambitions within groups old and new. As usual, Agent Whopper would have Heracles and the Battle Boys on standby, were Pooh or the others overwhelmed and in need of backup or extraction. Ganymede had already travelled to their training camp to prepare them. As the two teams prepared to enter the mist, Pooh recalled the first time he encountered the beast. It was in Babylon about 2,400 years ago. Both were there to purchase boys from the meat market. "Well, if it isn't Candyman's sweet little piece, how is the old thing?" Lord Bylil asked after seeing Pooh inspect a temple slave. Chapter 5, Fear Isle. Oh, this is going to be a weird one. Don't get your knickers in a knot. Pooh theme music. Pooh. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Pooh knows. Pooh laugh. Music up and out. Announcer. Your local Rohypnol dealer presents the Pooh. These half-hour dramatizations are designed to forcibly demonstrate to old and young alike that crime does not pay. Before the Pooh's thrilling adventure begins, remember to order your supply tomorrow. Insist on Rohypnol for better knockouts at less costs. And be sure to listen at the close of today's programme. We're fortunate in having a very distinguished guest in our audience this afternoon, whom we wish to introduce to you. Music up and out. Announcer, the Pooh, whose life is devoted to protecting the innocent, is in reality Charles Reginald Atkinson. Wealthy young bachelor, amateur criminologist, master of other people's minds. Only his friend and companion, the lovely sugar baby Nephra, knows that Atkinson and the Pooh are one and the same. Today's story, Fear Isle. Music up and out. FX, Storm in Distance. Charles, Mr. Dupre. I'm certainly glad you persuaded Miss Nefera and me to leave the cruise ship at Port-au-Prince and spend a few days here on your plantation. I don't know when I've had such a wonderful dinner. Sugar baby. It's been grand, Monsieur Dupre, and I had no idea Haiti was so beautiful. Dupre. I am delighted you could break your Caribbean cruise and allow me to return the hospitality that you both extended me when I visited New York. I must apologize for this storm, Mademoiselle Nefera. May I offer you more wine, Mr. Atkinson? Charles. Thank you. By the way, Monsieur Dupre. Dupre. Yes? Charles. While we were driving up from Port-au-Prince, I thought I heard drums in the hills. Drums strangely like the old drums of African voodoo. Dupre. You did, monsieur. I had hoped you had not noticed. Sugar baby. But why, Monsieur Dupre? Dupre. Mademoiselle, Haiti is beautiful, but its people, in spite of centuries of French, English and American influence, in spite of the untiring efforts of colonizers and the ceaseless devotion of ministers and priests, they remain at heart African. Their bodies are free, but their minds remain the slaves of voodoo. Charles. But I thought that voodooism had been stomped out of the West Indies. Dupre. Voodoo does not die, Monsieur Atkinson. Its followers may think they have forgotten the old gods. They may wear civilized clothes, go to school and to the many Christian churches of the island, but voodoo is always there in their primitive minds and souls, waiting. Sugar baby. When was the last outbreak? Dupre. Only 10 years ago, Mademoiselle Sugar baby. It was on a night very much like this. For days the drums had been calling from the hills. Where in the grottos of Sans Souci, the mad Prince Henry was paying his customary visit to Caillon, the high priest of voodoo. Start to fade under drums. Caillon needed human victims for his ritual of the blood moon, and on this, FX, voodoo drums, slave, Caillon, Caillon, the Prince Henry pretender has come to the grotto of Sans Souci. Caillon, what does he want? This fool who thinks the blood of the Emperor Henry Christophe courses his shriveled veins. Slave, he comes to offer victims for the festival of the blood moon, boys of his political enemies. Caillon, let him enter. Slave, enter Prince Henry. Caillon, great priest of voodoo, will hear you. Prince Henry. Caillon, in 3 days the festival of the blood moon begins. Where are your boy victims, Caillon? Where are the blood sacrifices you must offer the snake gods of voodoo? Caillon. They will be found, Prince Henry. Prince Henry. You are sure, Caillon? Caillon. Yes, I know you have come as always to offer me the families of your enemies, and your enemies are many. I, like the trees of the jungle, and the stalks of cane in the valley of Sans Souci, you will find the sacrifices for me, Prince Henry. You will find them. FX. Voodoo drums, FX. Crying baby mother. Hush, my baby, hush, or Caillon Diable will take you away to the grotto. Father. Be quiet, woman. In 2 days the festival begins, and no one knows who Caillon shall choose. FX. Knocking at door. Mother. Oh, father. Who's there? Tribesman. Open your door. FX. Door opens. Tribesman. Give me that boy. Mother. No. Father. No. Tribesman. Here is the boy Caillon has chosen. FX. Voodoo drums. Farmer. François, you read me last month's report of shipment from the plantation warehouse. François. Yes, monsieur. 200 casks of lamb, 40,000 pounds of raw sugar, 20 tons. Servant. Master the mistress. Caillon has taken her to the hills at Sans Souci. FX. Voodoo drums. FX. Bell tolls in background. Catholic priest. Latin. Ne si dominus ruscla, si kai patrius si deus novus. Merciful God, in thy power and wisdom give me strength against the powers of evil. Help me, O Lord, to protect my innocent flock. Lead the erring from the paths to the hills where the devil's disciples of voodoo consecrate their worship of heathen gods with human blood. FX. Door breaking down. FX. Crowdwaller tribesman. Stand back, priest. Stand back, fairest chosen. Catholic priest. Nay, thou shalt take no boy from this house of God. Tribesman. Stand back, priest. Stand back. Catholic priest. Nay, nay. FX. 3 gunshots. FX. Excited crowdwaller. Man. Wait, Jacob, the priest is dead. FX. More gunshots. FX. Crowdwaller fades. FX. Resume storm in background. Dupre. That, Mademoiselle Nefera, Monsieur Atkinson, happened only 10 years ago, but very sad. Very sad. Sugar baby. Oh, how horrible, Monsieur Dupre. Did the voodoo priest actually murder those boys and that planter's wife? Dupre. They and many more were sacrificed to the snake gods of voodoo, Mademoiselle Nephera, sugar baby. Oh, how horrible! Charles, can't the authorities do anything? Dupré, they are helpless, Monsieur Atkinson. Do you hear that drum? It is sundown. They're starting again. It may mean nothing. The drums often beat in the hills, but we live in constant dread of another orgy of blood, such as we had 10 years ago. Sugar baby, there is something sinister about it. Unearthly. Dupré. Quite, Mademoiselle Sugar baby. To follow the sound of that drum would be to turn back the hands of time and civilization 1,000 years. Juan. Mon père? Dupré. Ah, Juan, I've come to say good night. Dupré. Well, good night, my son. Oh, but wait, Mademoiselle Nephera, Monsieur Atkinson, this is my son. Charles. Well, how do you do? Sugar baby. Hello, Juan. Juan. How do you do, Mademoiselle Nephera? I'm glad to know you, Monsieur Atkinson. My father has spoken of you. You are staying a few days? Charles. Yes, only a few days. We must hurry back to New York. Juan. Oh, but you will be here tomorrow. The storm will leave and we can ride. I have a fine horse for you, Miss Nephera. Sugar baby. Oh, thank you, Juan. I'd love to ride with you. Juan. Then good night, Mademoiselle, Monsieur. See you tomorrow. Sugar baby. Good night, Juan. Charles. Good night, Juan. Juan. Good night, mon père. Dupré. Good night, my son. You tell Francois to make sure the garden gates are locked and the doors barred. Juan. Off mic. Oui, mon père. FX. Door closing. Dupré. Some more wine, Monsieur Atkinson. Charles. No, thank you, Mr. Dupré. Dupré. Yes. Charles. You spoke of those drums as if there were some particular significance. Dupré. There is, monsieur. Tonight of all nights. It is the eve of the festival of the blood moon. Sugar baby. You mean voodoo? Dupré. Yes, mademoiselle. Voodoo is like a plague. For years it may lie dormant, but sooner or later the priests of voodoo recall their own, and they slip into the jungles like ghosts, and the drums begin, sugar baby. But surely there'll be no human sacrifices, not now. Dupré. Voodoo does not change, Mademoiselle Sugar baby. That's why my gates are locked, the doors barred. Ah, but come, my friends. You have not interrupted your short holiday in the Caribbean to listen to tales of horror and death. Charles. On the contrary, I'd like to get your first-hand opinion on the actual powers of these fanatic priests. Dupré. Forgive me, Monsieur Atkinson. I cannot speak of voodoo as an academic thing. It's too close. Sugar baby. Has this man, Cayon, ever chosen anyone from your plantation? Dupré. Mademoiselle Sugar baby. I think you will understand when I tell you that the planter's wife, who was taken into the hills of Sanssouci 10 years ago tonight, was the mother of the boy you met a few moments ago, my son Juan, Sugar baby. Oh, forgive me, Dupré. You could not know, Charles. Forgive us, Monsieur Dupré, if we'd only stopped to think. Dupré. Oh, please. It was I who first spoke of voodoo. It is I who cannot forget Cayon, cannot rest until one day I find that murdering devil and kill him as he killed my beloved wife. The drums. Listen to them, carrying a message into the hills. Another victim. Another human sacrifice to the snake gods of voodoo. Servant, Mr. Dupré, Monsieur. Dupré. What? Oh, Francois, you are bleeding. Servant. They sprang up on me at the gates. One has been chosen. Dupré. Oh, my son, where is he? Servant. Cayon's men have taken him to the grottos of Sanssouci. Music up and out. FX. Horse hooves as Sugar baby catches up with Charles. Sugar baby. Charles. Charles. Whoa. Sugar baby. Charles. Charles. Sugar baby, you shouldn't be outside the gates. Sugar baby. Any news of Juan? Charles. No, we've ridden all through the valleys the whole day, even into the hills. Sugar baby. Where is Monsieur Dupré? Charles. In the hills. He wouldn't come back. Sugar baby. Oh, Charles. He hopes to follow the signal fires after sundown, but I'm afraid it's madness. They'd kill him. Where are all the servants, Sugar baby? Sugar baby. Gone. The native quarters are deserted. Where have you been, Charles? Charles. We've been everywhere. It's like riding through the land of the dead. I'm afraid it's hopeless, Sugar baby. Sugar baby. No, Charles. There's one chance. One chance. Charles. What do you mean, Sugar baby? Sugar baby. About an hour ago, an old woman came out of the cane brakes and spoke to me. She said she would take me to see Cayon and the festival of the blood moon if I would give her my diamond ring. Charles. It's a trick to get you into the jungle. Sugar baby. I know it's a trap, but I told her I would meet her on the jungle trail an hour after sundown. Charles. Are you mad, Sugar baby? Sugar baby. But Charles, it's a chance. A slim chance of finding poor little Juan. Charles. What good would it do you to find him, Sugar baby? You'd only die with him in the hidden grottos of Sanssouci. Sugar baby. I'll risk it to save Juan. I'll risk it if you'll come with me. As the Pooh. Charles. As the Pooh? Sugar baby. If the Pooh could humble those priests, they'd listen to you. Let me meet the old woman in the jungle. Let the Pooh follow us to the grottos. If you don't, poor Juan will be murdered just as they murdered his mother. Oh, please, please, Charles. Charles, it's madness, sugar baby. Sheer madness. But we'll try it. Music up and out, FX. Drums in background, sugar baby. Charles, this jungle is like a black pit. Charles, this is nothing, sugar baby. What lies ahead is worse. Do you want to go back? Sugar baby, more than anything in this world, Charles, but we can't. Charles, I know. Be careful, sugar baby. The old woman may be near here. Sugar baby, what are you going to do when we meet her? Charles, I'm going to make her fear you more than she fears Kyone. I'm going to... Shh! Quiet, sugar baby. Gaio, cackling. Don't be afraid, mamselle. Old Gaio will not hurt you. Give me the flashing white stone, and I will show you things which no white woman has ever looked upon before, and lived. Sugar baby. Here's the ring. Gaio. Ah, even in the dark it flashes like the fires of the blood moon which comes soon to the hills. Hurry, follow, you must not be late. Charles. Pooh. Wait, Gaio. Wait, Gaio. Who laughs? Who speaks? Oh, dog of a woman, you have not come alone. Sugar baby. I am alone, Gaio. Gaio. You lie. I heard the voice of a man. Sugar baby. No, Gaio, I am alone. Charles. Alone, Gaio. But in the darkness beside her walks a Pooh. Gaio. A Pooh. Charles. Yes, a Pooh stronger than the voodoo of Kyone, your master. Gaio. Nah, it's a trick, a lie. For that you'll die. Sugar baby. Oh, Charles, don't move, Gaio. Gaio. What? Charles, don't raise that knife. Let it fall to the ground, Gaio. Your fingers cannot hold it. Cannot hold the knife. Let it fall to the ground. Gaio. Mamselle, forgive. You are a priestess of many voices. Ah, take back your ring. Forgive. Have mercy, forgive. Charles. Get up, Gaio. Lead the way to the grotto of Kyone. Gaio. Yes, Charles. Go. Gaio. Yes, Charles. Or you will stand forever like a stone image in the jungle, and the snake gods will burn your soul in the fires of the mountains. Pooh laugh. Music up and out. FX. Voodoo chanting, Gaio. Cackle. Look, the flames, see, I have not disobeyed you. You hear the native chant. I have brought you to the grotto. Sugar baby. Where is Kyone? Where are the victims who are to be sacrificed to the snake gods? Gaio. Come along the great ledge beyond the altar of sacrifice. Kyone is there with the victims bound in chains. Ah, but wait, mademoiselle, wait, sugar baby. Be careful, Gaio, you've been warned. Gaio. Oh, mademoiselle, you go alone. Do not make me take you to Kyone. If your power is not greater than his, he will slay you, and he will slay me. Oh, mercy, mademoiselle, mercy, no. Sugar baby. Pooh, what shall I do? Gaio. Eh, mademoiselle? Why doesn't the voice answer you, huh? Where is this power of darkness? Has it fled in terror before the fires of Kyone? It has! Kyone! I have brought you another victim, a beautiful woman. Sugar baby. Charles! Steady, sugar baby, the time has come. Don't show fear or they'll kill you. Gaio. Look, Kyone, look! A beautiful woman with skin like ivory. FX. Voodoo crowd while cheering. Kyone. The hour has come. The old gods await the hot blood of this woman. Hear me. By all the powers of Kyone, this flower shall be the first sacrifice. FX. Excited, cheering Kyone. Bring the woman to the altar. Let the mountain hear, and the dead stones of the grotto see her die. Gaio. Beware, Kyone. That girl is not afraid. In the darkness of the jungle, I heard a voice. A voice of a Pooh. Kyone. Be still, old woman. Sugar baby. Gaio speaks the truth, Kyone. Listen to her. She's right. I am not afraid of your voodoo gods. I have come to guide one who is stronger than all your powers of voodoo. The following is Gregorian-style chanting. Priest, where Kyone walks, the earth is forever barren. All, barren. Priest, Kyone is the ageless one. All, ageless one. Priest, Kyone is nothing of the earth, the sea or sky. All, sea or sky. Kyone, where is this voice, woman? Let Kyone hear it speak. Call it from the Pooh. Let it try its strength against Kyone, against the gods of voodoo who cry for blood. Pooh. Pooh laugh. I am here, Kyone. Gaio. The voice. Kyone. What white devil's magic have you brought to this hidden place, Gaio? Pooh, laughing. Take care, Kyone. You have challenged me and I am here. Show sign of fear and this savage rabble will turn on you like beasts of prey. Gaio. Slay it, Kyone. Show you are stronger than this voice of the Poohs. Take the sword of Christoph and slay the girl. Her blood upon the altar stone will prove thy power. Take the sword. Look, her white blood gleams in the light of the fires. Strike. Pooh, laughing. Yes, prove your strength, Kyone. Try to raise the sword of Christoph from the altar. Try to kill this girl who has come to take your victims from you. Strike her if you can. Kayon begins singing a short chant. Kayon, my arms. Gayo, lift it from the rock. Kayon, it will not move. It feels as if chains hold it to the rock. What power is this that takes all strength from the body of Kayon, like water from a broken gourd? Pooh, a power as old as voodoo, Kayoni. The power of the mind. The power white men call hypnosis. The power you call the evil eye. Kayon, the evil eye. Alima Kemasaba. Voice of the Pooh. What angry god of voodoo sends you? Pooh, I am more than a voice, Kayon. I am here the Pooh, though you cannot see me because I hide in the shadows. Watch, Kayon. I will prove to your murderous slaves the white man's magic is stronger than all your voodoo sorcery. Watch the sword of Christoph. I will raise the sword you could not move. Watch. FX Crowdwalla. Gaio. Kayon, look. The sword rises, form the rock with no hands lifting it. What people have seen. They no longer fear you. Kill the girl or they will murder you. Kayon. Murder me. Oh, voice in the shadows. Who are you? Pooh. I will answer your question, Kayon. I am the Pooh. And here is the answer to your challenge, Kayon. FX, sword breaking in two. Pooh, the broken sword of Christoph. FX, Crowdwalla in amazement. FX, sword hitting the ground. Pooh, sugar baby. They believe you're a sorceress with greater powers than Kayon. Pretend you are such, sugar baby. Tell them the snake gods are angry and want no more human sacrifice. Sugar baby, I'll try. Pooh, they're closing in on Kayon. Don't try to stop them. Don't move, sugar baby. Watch and wait. Man, the old gods have sent this white priestess to destroy Kayon. FX, excited crowd, Walla sugar baby. Charles, I can't stand it, I can't. Pooh, you must. They've slain Kayon and his murderess, now they'll turn to you. Command them to go back to the valleys to their Christian churches. Tell them no harm must come to One Dupré or any of the prisoners or this grotto will become a furnace of fire. They'll believe you now. Man, shouting, Kayon is dead. Great white priestess, let the sacrifice begin. If blood wound glows pale in the sky beyond the mouth of the grotto. Sugar baby. No, there must be no more human sacrifice. The old gods are sick of blood. They command you to go back to your homes, back to the churches of the one God. Hear me, if harm comes to one of Kayon's victims or to the boy Juan Dupré, this grotto will be filled with fire. The rocks will melt, the earth will tremble. FX. Crowdwalla questioning her words. Pooh, they're wavering, sugar baby. Quick, take the broken sword, slash the great drum. It is the heart of voodoo. Hurry, then they will obey you. Sugar baby, get out of the grotto. Voodoo is dead. Man, the white priestess has destroyed the great drum. Run for your lives. FX. Crowdwalla in panic. Pooh, sugar baby, you're free. Don't faint. Hold on to the altar. Hold on. Don't let them see you fall. Sugar baby. Charles. Oh, Charles, music up and out. FX. Airplane motor flying. Charles. Well, sugar baby, it's goodbye to Haiti. In 12 hours, this plane will be in New York. How do you feel, priestess? Sugar baby. I don't think I'll ever be the same, Charles. But I don't regret it. Taking those boys back to their parents, and Juan back to his father. It was worth it, even if I have nightmares for the rest of my life. Charles. Hey, look, sugar baby, Carpathian, and the ruins of King Christoph's citadel. From here it looks like a tropical paradise. Sugar baby. Maybe it will be, Charles, now that the Pooh has broken the spell of voodoo. Charles. No, sugar baby, no one man can dispel the power of voodoo. Education the Christian churches are doing all in their power, but Dupré was right. Voodoo doesn't die, it merely slumbers. We have found once more that one of the greatest causes of human misery is ignorance. Music, up and out. Announcer. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Pooh programme has the honour to present a man who has spent his life bringing criminals to justice. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you the Assistant District Attorney of Queens County, New York, Mr. Anthony Lavotti. Anthony. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I don't know anything about crime in Haiti, but there are times when we could use a fellow like the Pooh here in New York. You couldn't lend him to us by any chance, could you? Announcer. Well, I'm not so sure that you really need him, Mr. Lavotti. Law enforcement has made such marvellous strides here in the past few years. However, I'll ask the Pooh if he's available. Anthony. Do that, but seriously, Mr. Roberts, I'm grateful for this opportunity to congratulate this Pooh programme. They're really doing a great job, not only in entertaining the public, but in showing people the folly and absolute uselessness of crime. In fact, Mr. Roberts, all of us in the business of law enforcement appreciate the splendid cooperation we've been getting from the Pooh broadcast. Announcer. Thank you, Mr. Lavotti. It's very gratifying to know that our efforts to show that crime doesn't pay meet with the approval of you and your associates. And I'm sure our listening audience joins me in congratulating you on the successful war your department is waging on crime in New York. It's been a real privilege to have you in our audience this afternoon, and I hope you'll stop in again. Anthony. Thank you, I shall. Music. Announcer. This programme has been a dramatised version of one of the many copyrighted stories which appear in the Pooh magazine now on sale at your local newsstands. All the characters and all the incidents named are fictitious. Any similarities to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. Pooh. Pooh laugh. The weed of crime bears bigger fruit. Crime does not pay. The Pooh knows. Pooh laugh out. Announcer. Next week, same time, same station, Rohypnol, America's finest looper, will again present another thrilling adventure of the Pooh. Be sure to listen. Rising up in bed, the imp looked dazed. That infernal tequila! Episode 6, Baby Vamp. On March 15th, 2023, Pooh needed some information about a vampire cult that was now capable of time travel. Normally, vamps are forbidden access to the time stream and lack the ability to enter it, so Pooh concluded they must be feeding off of a demon, consensually or not, to gain such an extraordinary skill. The imp had no desire to see the bloodsuckers zipping around through time. That would be messy. Although dead, vampires were the living dead. Their souls, though damned, remained in their original bodies. Bodies healed, reanimated, and made immortal. Fouling the mists with living but dead beings would lead to all kinds of complications. There was already evidence of such being done. Time travel was a bit like channeling. The soul had to be outside a body to move about. When it got to its destination, then it could take on a physical essence like with Pooh and his agents. Within the time stream, however, that was an with the living dead. No one wanted to muck through vampire waste in the time streams, and the beings were so unpredictable that they were wild cards, who rarely cleaned up after themselves wherever they tread. Major unrepairable alterations through time would occur, leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. Unlike some of the afters Pooh left behind, their activities could not always be dismissed as a human's flight of fancy, insanity, or panic. Even putting time-travelling aside, the vampires' stationary lives in every human culture had left behind a great deal of evidence that they existed beyond myth and lore. Tatters was a zombie, but had a separated soul bound to the Isle. Pooh could take his dead friend on excursions through time, when Candyman didn't have him imprisoned in the dungeons for eating from the boy reserves the demon lord stashed away for special occasions. Time-travelling vampires were an abomination, and Pooh was going to put an end to it. "Stay the flip out of my lane," the Demidemon said out loud. Pooh had a vampire contact in Paris, Jim Morrison. If anyone knew what was happening in Vamp World, Jim would know. Finding him wasn't hard. One only had to station up in a particular cemetery around midnight, and Jim would eventually come along to bring himself a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of beer, which he'd place on his grave and mourn himself for an hour. The imp had been friends with him since Jim's living years, even before he was a curious and wild adolescent prowling the Alameda High School's hallways for tail. Pooh was there in 1957 to introduce him to the wild side of boys. The target ruining was for another, a Spanish boy named Alejandro Diego Mendez, but Jim was to be the conduit, as Alejandro had a huge crush on his classmate. Thus, the Morrison boy was filled with temptations he normally did not have. There was an intimate match-up in the locker room between Jim and Alejandro. Pooh got his boy, and the future vocalist was left with all sorts of puzzling feelings. Since getting a taste of multiple sexes, Jim has been flicking back and forth between them throughout life and death, but mostly he likes the ladies or reasonable facsimiles. Their first encounter was by happenstance when Jim was just 4 years old. Pooh was on a mission to Albuquerque to execute a phony Native American shaman who had sold the Demidemon a fake eagle feather. Discovering he had gifted child stage actor Montgomery Clift with a turkey feather during a visit to New York City in 1935, the imp sought revenge. At the time, Clift, 14, was appearing on Broadway in the play Fly Away Home at the 48th Street Theatre. Pooh took a fancy to the boy and began staging his ruin. When Montgomery took the gifted feather, which Pooh thought was appropriate due to the play's title, he threw a hissy fit, declaring the eagle feather to be that of a turkey. Turkey feathers rankle stage actors, as they call their failed productions turkeys. They even avoid the bird on Thanksgiving. The superstitious actor wanted Pooh out of his dressing room. So, Pooh had a grudge to settle. Travelling to New Mexico in 1947, at twilight he set fire to the shaman's truck, laden with all sorts of fakery, with a ball of pink fire shooting from the mist, while screaming, "That's for your jive-ass turkey feather, motherfucker!" 4-year-old Jim Morrison, who was driving by riding in his family's 1947 Ford Super Deluxe station wagon, witnessed it all. It left quite an impression on the lad well into his grown-up years. The second verse to Light My Fire was actually written about Pooh's fireball. "Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire." You never knew what form the incorrigible musician was going to be in and what he was hungry for. He could be in the form of an adult man or woman, a boy or girl child, a bat or whatnot. His fickle appetite could be for anything. Most usually females, though. Pooh didn't have an extra one of those available. At least one still talking to him. So he brought along Agent Bend. Everyone likes someone you can bend in any manner, be they male or female. Plus, the contortionist and aerialist could hang from the light fixture, were Jim wanting to go at it in his bat form. Pooh had wanted to bring along Jim's old classmate and locker room squeeze Alejandro, who was now Agent Scorpion, but it wasn't possible with his being stationed in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, assisting Agent Plague in spreading smallpox among a village at war with Camazot's bat colony. He just had to get rid of that pissing tower guest. Agent Bend would be a blood offering to the vampire. Just a snack, though. Immortal blood was an irresistible nectar to vamps, and the demon taint added quite an aphrodisiac-type kick to it. He'd make it home in one dizzy piece, with just a few holes here and there, say on his neck, thighs and belly, the tender parts, maybe a big toe. OK, not that. Bendy had long, skinny toes from dangling on things with them. Probably a bit tough, those toes. Bendy would still be somewhat spellbound to his vampire master once back on the Isle, but that would slowly fade into dispossession. The duo waited in the shadows of the Père Lachaise cemetery. Annoyed, the imp had to keep shushing Agent Ben's giggling and his repetitive, "Is that him? No, it's a ghoul looking for Din Din. Is that him? No, it's a necrophiliac in search of a quickie. Is that him? No, it's a grave robber looking for jewellery. Is that him? No, it's a goth boy writing love poems. Is that him? Is that him? Is that him?" with giggles throughout. Pooh was beginning to regret the dwarf massacre in Texas. Grayson must have driven those little crappers insane, in bed and out. Agent Bend was new to field work. Pooh thought the former Richard Bruce Grayson should still be a trainee. How he was promoted so fast, well, one just had to consider his impressive contortionist skills and eagerness to please. The imp would be discussing the matter with his aide-de-camp on their return to the Isle. "Is that him?" "Oh, that is him. It's Baby Vamp Jim. Perfect," purred Pooh. "Holy Bat Boy, Commander Pooh," Agent Bend giggled again. Baby Vamp Jim looked like a miniature heroin addict with some extras. Pale, gaunt, sunken-eyed, shirtless, wearing leather pants but shoeless. In his prepubescent vampire form, Jim stood only 4 feet tall, had a very light smattering of dark brown furring all over his face and body, grey eyes, a short conical muzzle, sharp baby teeth fangs came out each side of his mouth, pointed ears jutted from either side of his head, a love bead necklace hung around his neck. The wingspan was not fully developed, so little Jim was forced to hop around. In one of his claws, he clutched a flower bouquet, while holding a bottle of Kronenbourg 1664 beer in the other. "He's so cute," trilled Agent Bend. Both the bloodsucker and the twistable agent appeared to be the age of 9, but of course were older than they appeared. Well, at least Jim was. Had he not been turned, Jim would be nearing 80 and likely still hobbling after teenage girls and the occasional boy. "Come along, Agent Bend. Juvenile Dracula's about to tilt your princess whirl," said Pooh. "Do you think he'll like me?" Giggles. "Oh, I'm sure you'll be nibbled about." "Oh, shut it down, Agent Bend, or back to the dwarfs you will go. I'm sure I missed killing a few of them." Chapter 7. Raw Recruits. While Pooh was barely restraining himself from seeing how far he could twist Agent Ben's neck around in Paris, his aide-de-camp Agent Whopper was escorting Heracles through the barracks in search of raw recruits for the Battle Boys Pooh's savage secret strike force. It was a long process to become part of the elite force. Trainees were handpicked and then were guided through to agent status by Pooh and Agent Whopper. At the same time, Heracles would come to the Isle and conduct various exercises in search of the best of the best. Making his selections out of a group of 5, the son of Zeus took 3 of the boys out into the forest for their first test with the Trianti. Later, the other 2 boys would be given a different test with the Minotaur. If there is one thing that frightens many people and keeps them shackled to their own insecurities, it is the fear of conflict. The Trianti gets you used to it. It trains you to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, so you aren't intimidated anymore by what you might come across. The Trianti trains you physically, mentally, and emotionally. You might not find this fun, but I think it's important for you to do. Heracles was walking slightly more slowly now. He was looking up and around at the trees, high up in the branches. He lives somewhere around here. You have to look very closely for him. What does he look like? Trainee Romp whispered. He looks like a piece of a tree, like a branch with other branches branching off from him. He hides up in the trees, and he challenges anyone who ever calls on him. Is he dangerous? Trainee Kebab asked. Yes, but I'm here to supervise. We know each other. Then Heracles began to call out in a voice that seemed to give him authority over everything else. It was deep and loud. Trianti, where are you? Trianti! The 3 boys heard a cracking in the branches above. High up there was movement, and a large branch seemed to break off a tree. It began to fall, tumbling down, hitting other branches, getting bigger and bigger and bigger in the children's eyes until there was a large branch the size of a man falling directly in front of Heracles. When it was a few feet from the ground, it morphed slightly to form a body, a long, thin body with long, stick-like legs, long branching arms, and a face that was like a lump of bark sitting on top, with a deep woody scar across one eye, a squint, and a smile. Come here! The Trianti shouted at Heracles, and instead of embracing him, the Trianti swung at him with one of its branchy arms. It was so fast that it was like a blur. Heracles dodged out of the way and fired a punch back at the Trianti's face, but the Trianti managed to bring his other arm up in time to block, and soon the 2 were circling each other. The demigod Heracles faked a punch and then shot in low to tackle the Trianti to the ground. The Trianti shouted out, "No!" as he fell down to the earth. The strongman climbed on top of the Trianti and grabbed one of the branch-like arms the creature possessed. "No, not my arms!" the Trianti yelled, and in an almighty buck of his body, he managed to create a space and wiggle out from underneath Heracles. Using his arms, as if they were legs, the Trianti pushed himself back up to standing and began to try to kick Heracles in the body. Heracles rolled away, took a blow to the back, but then managed to catch one of the Trianti's kicking and flailing legs. He swept the Trianti to the ground and locked up the Trianti's leg in his own body, holding the woody foot with his hands, and began to lean back and apply leverage to what would have been the thing's ankle joint. "I'll break it," Heracles said, mildly playfully. The boys weren't sure if he meant it. "Oh, fine," the Trianti shouted. "I give in." The Trianti tapped the ground twice. Heracles let go, and they got up and shook hands. "Good fight," the Trianti said, smiling. "You've still got it." "And you still get too emotional," Heracles said. "If you hadn't gotten so angry at me for taking you down, your kicks wouldn't have been so wild and easy to catch." "Yeah, you're right," the Trianti said. "How are you, my old friend? Where are Newton and Toot? Is Toot still playing Nymph? I miss them so. I miss Australia too. They're fine, as is our camp. Always pestering me to bring them to the Isle so they can see you and Ganymede. I will soon." "Sounds good. Now who's next? Who are these little ones?" The Trianti looked at all 3 boys. Trainee Kebab and Trainee Romp stepped back. Trainee Itch stayed in the same spot. "Have they come to fight?" the Trianti said. He seemed almost psychopathic to the children. All he seemed interested in was fighting. "Well, they have come so I can evaluate where they're at in training. I want you to help us." "All right. But you must go easy to begin." "Not possible." "All right then, if you will not start off slow, then there will be no fight." The Trianti squirmed and looked uncomfortable, like he was trying to hold something in. Then said, They have the scent on them, as do all your boys. Were these whelps molested, sold at market, or curious? Their stains are new. I can see the ruining fresh on their faces. Were they just reaped this morning? Such raw recruits, such scared pretty little boys. 2 of the trainees blushed and looked ashamed. The other reddened in anger. Stop with your mind games. They're uneasy enough. I'll not let you take an advantage in the fight through intimidating them further, declared Heracles. Oh, all right, the Trianti said. Fine, I'll go easy. Boring, boring. If you get too mad, I will end the fight. Though they've been on the isle for a bit, this is their first time to be truly tested. Let's not break them just yet. Baby steps. There was a slight tremor of the isle's ground causing the trees to shake. Heracles said, Remember, Mother Osun is watching. Would you raise her wrath? Do not offend your host. Fine. Mother Osun was the isle. Once worshipped in West Africa as the river goddess of femininity, fertility, beauty, and love, she was connected to destiny and divinity. She fell in a mighty battle with Candyman, trying to protect boys from the village of Osogbo. It was the time of the great demon and god war 2 millennia ago, which saw many of the primordial and great gods fall to the darkness. Even Olympus fell. Zeus had to give his cupbearer Ganymede as a hostage to end Candyman's siege. After centuries of resentment over losing and wandering lost across the land, Heracles was approached by Pooh, who was beginning a rebellion against the demon lord and needed Heracles to train an army for him. Similar attacks were waged in Africa as the Dark Lord sought to possess many boys, which broadened his power. After defeating Osun, the ancient evil one drug her to the Black Sea, where in time he built his castle atop her, while filling his island with the spoils of war and ruinings. Although bound, Mother Osun did what she could to watch over the isle's ruined boys. The Trianti bowed and stepped back, walked a few paces, and turned to face the children. Heracles looked at Trainee Itch. Itch? I'm ready, Trainee Itch, still reddened with anger, said. Okay, you have to challenge him to start the fight. Just say, Trianti, where are you? And he will begin. Okay. Trainee Itch felt nerves as if they were trying to break out of his stomach. Breathe deeply, Heracles said. Beckon the pink mist. Breathe in its power. Breathe out your fear. Push the nervousness out using your breath and relax. Get ready. Trainee Itch pushed the breath out and sucked a few deep breaths of pink mist in. Trianti, where are you? He said, trying to mask the shakiness in his voice. The Trianti began to dance around, on the balls of his feet, and he gradually moved closer towards the lad. Trainee Itch had his hands up by his face, but he was not moving. He was frozen to the ground. Relax, Itch, Heracles said. Trainee Itch was very tense. He could feel everyone watching him. He felt he had to do well in front of... Boom! The Trianti punched him on the shoulder. It stung. Oh, you! Trainee Itch suddenly felt a surge of anger and he charged at the Trianti, throwing a punch that was fast and strong. It hit the Trianti, but he had swung so wildly that he left himself open, and the Trianti slapped him around the face at the same time. Henry, you idiot, relax, don't think. Feel the ground when you move. The voice of Itch's older brother entered his head. He thought of the 2 of them in their garden, in the before, when his older brother would show him some things about fighting, so that he could fend his father off. Okay, Trainee Itch, Henry said, breathing into and out of the stinging pain in his face, and then forgetting about it. Okay. He started to imagine it was a game. He was playing, sparring with his brother. His feet became lighter, he became freer, and he advanced towards the Trianti. He's too wild, he's worse than me, the Trianti said, who threw out another quick slap at the boy's face, but Trainee Itch deflected it and threw a strike back, which landed straight on the Trianti's chin. The Trianti wobbled and fell back. Crikey, the Trianti said. Can I go harder now? It said, getting up to its feet and looking at Heracles. No, that's it for now, Heracles said. It's someone else's turn. Trainee Kebab, have a go. No, I'm not fighting. Why? I don't want to. I don't want to get punched or slapped like Trainee Itch did. If you don't train now, you might regret it later. You might even enjoy it. No, I don't want to, Trainee Kebab said. I don't need to. What do you mean? I mean, I bet I could beat him without touching him. I can feel what creatures are thinking. I can see what is going on inside of them, and I reckon I could change it if I wanted to, so that they behave as I want them to. Okay, why don't you try that out then, Heracles said. This is the perfect time. You can always stop if you wish. All you have to do is say I quit. Okay then, Trainee Kebab said. He stepped forward and looked at the Trianti. Presently, the Trianti was motionless, just standing. He had nothing going on inside of him. He was just life, still, like a tree. Trianti, where are you? Trainee Kebab said. And then he could see inside the Trianti, something turned on, like a light switch. Something was triggered, and inside the Trianti, Trainee Kebab could see red streams going around its body, all filled with the words, "Attack, Trainee Kebab." The Trianti marched forward and had his right fist clenched. Trainee Kebab saw the greyness inside the Trianti's body, and using his own mind, he turned it to pink, into something cooler. The Trianti slowed down. His clenched fist relaxed, but he was still walking towards the boy. Within the streams of pinkness going around the Trianti's insides, Trainee Kebab could still see the words "Attack Trainee Kebab" written in them. He tried to change the words to "Leave Trainee Kebab alone," but the word "attack" kept popping back up. The Trianti was close, and he pushed Trainee Kebab, who stumbled backwards. The boy kept trying to change the words, but it wasn't working. "Offer no resistance," Heracles suddenly said. Trainee Kebab then stopped fighting against the words "Attack Trainee Kebab," and he let them be. He gave them light, he gave them space, he gave them presence, and they began to shift by themselves into "Be kind to Trainee Kebab." The Trianti reached Trainee Kebab and held out his hand. "Hello, Trainee Kebab. I am the Trianti. How may I be of service today?" "Good, the fight is over," Heracles declared. The Trianti broke away. Trainee Kebab stopped looking so deeply inside of him. "Blimey, what was that?" the Trianti said, marching back to his original position. "The puffer did something to me then, didn't he? He did something inside of me. I've never experienced that before. I felt all kind and warm and cosy inside. It was horrible. Just horrible." "Well done, Trainee Kebab. Well done," Heracles said. "Now, Trainee Romp." "But I can't fight or do what Trainee Kebab does," Trainee Romp said softly. "What good am I?" "You can only be yourself and see what comes naturally," Heracles said. "Are you ready?" "I guess," Trainee Romp said reluctantly, feeling as if he would instantly quit. The boy stepped forward. "Trianti, where are you?" he said in a resigned tone. The Trianti walked forward. Trainee Romp ran away. The Trianti sped up his walk and began chasing the boy. Trainee Romp started running faster and began to giggle as he realised that the Trianti was not fast enough to keep up with him. Looking back, he waved at the lagging creature, who grew angry and started shouting at him to slow down. "Stop running! There is no running in fight, Poofter!" "Running is fine," Heracles replied testily. "He is very good at it. Runs faster than Newton with a rutting buck on his tail. If he runs better than you, then why not run?" "But he's not fighting!" the Trianti shouted out, wishing he was able to run faster. Then Trainee Romp found himself running up a tree, almost like a squirrel, but just using his feet. The boy pushed off the tree and flipped backwards so that he was on the other side of the Trianti, facing his back. As the Trianti turned and swiped at him, Trainee Romp ducked and kicked at the being's legs. Something broke. "Oh, mercy!" the Trianti screamed. "He's broken my leg!" Trainee Romp looked stunned and horrified at one of the legs of the Trianti, which was now like a snapped branch, hanging onto the rest of his leg by a tiny piece of bark. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." "Oh, shut up, will you?" the Trianti said. "I'm a fast healer. That's what makes me a Trianti. I'm just annoyed that you managed to do it, that's all." The Trianti struggled up to stand on one foot, and then he pushed the broken piece of his leg back into the upper half, and the leg fused back with a little burst of light, leaving it looking like nothing had ever happened. "Fighting is over," Heracles said. "Thank you, Trianti." "Bring me some easier ones next time," the Trianti said, climbing back up his tree, thoroughly annoyed at 3 losses to children in a row. "I can't guarantee that," said Heracles, as he watched his old friend climbing back up to where he rested. Heracles turned to the children, who now looked older to him. They looked stronger, tested, not so raw. "All of you did remarkably well. Very well done. The more you train, the more you practice, the easier everything becomes. Gradually new things will emerge. You will develop more skills, going far beyond what you ever thought possible. You all tapped into your own spontaneity, your own flow, and that is important for everything in life. Very well done. Now, he said, taking a deep breath in through his nostrils. Now you can go back to the barracks. There's to be mutton and strawberry wine waiting for you. I'm Damien, and this is more of my story. Seth took out a small medicine bottle and dropped 4 capsules onto his hand, one for him and one for each of us recruits. He held them up, open-palmed, offering them first in ritual to Satan for blessing. Don't get the wrong idea, brothers. What's in my hand is not an opioid or ordinary prosaic street drug, not LSD or meth or fentanyl. We're beyond that craziness. Each of these capsules is filled with sacrificial powder from the demon Beelzebub. It is the essence of Beelzebub, accumulated over centuries from his blood. Grey wanted us to use it as an introduction ritual, your first of many rewards for obedience and loyalty. Be ready for some visions that at first will be shocking, maybe initially repulsive, but let go and accept it, okay? We nodded and agreed. Seth distributed the capsules. Now relax, close your eyes, take it when I say now, and wait for it to work. Seth then handed us each a capsule and a small plastic glass of sour wine. Now! In and swallowed. We laid back in our seats, still naked, eyes closed, waiting for the effect. It took several minutes for the contents to work magic in me. I was in a new reality, at first foggy and unclear, but the black mist soon cleared. The reality was corporeal, all my senses were functional. I found myself in ancient Babylon at a temple. Babylon was full of temples, each with its own special function and followers. This temple was built to honour Satan, set apart for rites and rituals that wove Satan's presence into every sort of perverted sex and immorality. Here, I had set aside part of my mud brick residence for my own worship space. When finished, priests from the temple first inspected it and then dedicated it with a child sacrifice to Satan. It was now ready for worship. But back to the temple. It was more than a temple. It was also an exclusive satanic sex market with sellers and buyers. What was for sale? Boys and girls. Every year, 40 adolescents were auctioned as servants, transferred to their masters in groups of 4. Prior to the auction, recruiters from the temple had scoured the impoverished countryside for children, promising their parents that they'd live lives of luxury. Seeing a way out of poverty, parents agreed and were rewarded for relinquishing their rights. The girls were later separated from the boys and placed with the sisterhood. The boys went into the hands of the Satanic Brotherhood. This was the part I focused on. The boys were first dedicated to Satan and coerced into submitting to new rites and rituals over several years' time. Everything about their bodies was totally perfect. The priests had made them aware, even anxious to explore exciting facets of Satanism in new sacred chambers. The 4 were not slaves, sworn to obedience by threat. They were now more than simply obedient. Their conditioning had evolved them into wanting to be enthusiastic partners to their owners' demonic and depraved whims and desires. At the market, all 40 stood naked, offering themselves for inspection. I looked the boys over carefully and found 4 astonishingly beautiful ones. I had to have them. The bidding started and was intense, but I did not stop raising my ante until the 4 that I wanted were in my possession and at home with me. That night they gathered at my altar, and without my directing, began their invoking first to Beelzebub and Baphomet, and then to Satan, as the priests had trained them to do. It was immediately clear that they were worth what I'd paid for them. Each of the 4 slipped into satanic possession almost at once. I also invoked until all of us were under Satan's domination. I chose one, the most beautiful and intelligent one, to offer his virginity to Satan on my altar. He had anticipated my slight gesture toward the altar. He bent over and offered himself. I motioned to the other 3 to prepare him for consummation. Over the next 3 nights, each gave up his virginity in the same way. On the 5th night, we united in every sex act imaginable, all to the glory of Satan. Then several days must have passed without my knowledge. The servants gathered in the chamber, ready for new twistedness, even more empowered by our love for Satan and our deep growing love for each other. That night I announced, "My brothers, Lord Satan has informed me that tonight is the night of the vampires. The sun is setting, and 4 young vampires are rousing, hungry and famished. They will engage you as partners in unbridled satanic lust." I continued, "In your training, you were told that vampires are total creations of Satan, and Satan takes much joy in their human and animal feedings. So much joy, in fact, that they are eternally undead, the living dead. But interacting with them is dangerous. You are aware that a snake about to strike can detect warmth. So can these marvellous creatures. Every part of your body must remain a hand's length from their fangs. Be warned, if flesh is that close, they cannot control their bite. But if you manage the risk, the sheer pleasure of tonight will be indescribable. Can you follow that instruction? Yes, of course, they answered. Here's how it will unfold. They will feed on white goats. The priests have already prepared the animals for their fate through the demon Azazel. They will offer themselves freely and without a sound for a painless end. I've done it before. Vampire sex has a powerful effect on mind and body. Yet just watching them feed, it's clear that feeding alone is an incredible tribute to Satan. You will enjoy it, and especially what comes after that. I clapped my hands. Bring in the goats! A door opened, and 4 small white goats entered the room. I clapped again, and 4 naked vampires entered, youthful, glowing, and hungry. Their sharp baby fangs glistened. Their eyes glowed red. Take them! They are yours! I pointed to the goats. We were mesmerised by what unfolded next. The child vampires went to the necks of the animals. Their arms surrounded each of their meals. They moaned in pleasure, creating a crescendo of limitless desire in us 4. They finished and stood up, facing us. "Hail Satan!" they proclaimed, blood still dripping from their lips. "Hail Satan!" we answered, confident of the bond among us. I needed to instruct them quickly. The vampire reaches the apex of desire at the end of taking a life. Go and bring the black chalice. One of my servants moved to the altar and picked up the chalice carved of black marble. Each vampire was now in heat, fed by the blood, and animated by the life just taken. I held the chalice in front of one and then the next, and all drooled into the vessel. My servants invoked Satan over the receptacle. I then put the chalice on the altar. The vampires laid on the floor, face up, legs held up and spread. "Seed us!" they demanded. "Now!" This was a dangerous moment, and in its risk incredibly desirable. "We need your satanic seed, and we need it now," I warned. "Remember the distance." With the same agility that the vampires had pierced the goats, my servants pierced vampire arse. Vampire legs wound around them. I merely watched entranced with desire as Satan joined the 8 in an orgy. Love for Satan whirled around each coupling. Invocations to demons abounded. Demons entered the space as wispy dark ghosts dancing and twirling as satanic desire moved toward its culmination. Then, all 8 peaked at once. Surprisingly and very suddenly, the demons and young vampires disappeared together, leaving me with my sated servants. The intensity of the trance was fading. I resented being wakened from my trip. "Hail Satan, my brother," Seth whispered with a smile. "You had a great trip, didn't you?" "Fuck yes, Seth," I responded. "I can't wait to tell you what happened." Logan was just coming out of his trip. Seth was on his left, I on his right. I wondered where Logan had been taken and was eager to find out. Seth then took my hand and we both knelt near Drew. "Embrace the triumph of evil. Revel in the perversions of pure evil. Hail Master Satan and his minion Beelzebub," he kept on chanting. Drew shook off the trance and spoke. "Fuck! Awesome! Hail Satan! Hail the essence of Beelzebub! Hail Satan! Hail the demon Baphomet, my new master! Hail Satan! Hail the demon Baphomet, my new master! Hail Satan! Hail the demon Baphomet, my new master!" We were all still aroused and ached to share details of our trips, including Seth. I wondered what they'd think of my incredible adventure in ancient Babylon. Seth said that we'd learn more about Satan, and I was ready to share with my fellow recruits about the alliance between demons and vampires. "Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire." Chapter 8, Bright Boy. Pooh decided he needed a libation before taking the trainees to Plague Island to teach them how to bind spirits to physical objects. He'd taught the Warrens how to sew just last week in 1952, when he'd spoken to the New England Society for Psychic Research through a Ouija board. But those publicity hounds were horrible at it. That infernal doll was still running amok. No, Lorraine, they're not supposed to be still moving like that. Not even the eyes. Certainly that chimp should not be banging cymbals. The idea of being bound in an inanimate object is that the spirit is frozen. Can't move, can't fuck with shit around it. For cripe's sake, Ed, put down the gin and give it a go. Lorraine's passing ghosts again. What a smell. Having had enough of it, Pooh spelled out screw you, and then sent the planchette flying into the back of Ed's head, ending their conversation. Pooh's frustrations were mounting. Bendy had shacked up with baby vamp Jim Morrison in Paris and refused to leave the Père Lachaise cemetery. Right disobeyed a direct order, he did, fumed Pooh. Doing flips from one tombstone to another, nude cartwheeling down the lane, incessant giggling all night long. Scandalous. Well, at least it'll keep him out of my hair, while I attend to more important matters. But his time will come. I'll unmuzzle Tatters and toss that little crapper into the cell with him. The imp had been coming down hard on the boys, getting them prepared for major trouble. Agent Honeysuckle was still finishing her mission report to be added to his own, but everything they uncovered during their visit to the camp leader's lair set off all the alarms, and he needed to finish the Ganymede and Robbie drama. It bothered him, so he'd put it off, but the boy deserved having his story told. Too many missions, too many dramas, too much demonic and vampiric activity. Wicked things were coming, and his boys better be ready for it. And Jonah. That Jonah. But first a drink. Pooh misted to present-day London, where he decided to first interrupt Agent Sugarbaby's escapades with an 82-year-old Member of Parliament. He was going to send the pregnant boy off on an easy mission to a Catholic girls' school in Barcelona. You'll fit right in with them, love. Lots of pregger girls in short skirts wobbling about and needing to pee. When the Mother Superior is busy whacking someone with a ruler, sneak out and swipe her diary for me. Be along now. Pooh chimed before looking at the octogenarian. And you daft knobhead. Ooh, that's a little pregnant boy you're trying to get naked. Shame on you. Why, I have half a mind to speak with the Prime Minister about you. You Tories are all the same. The imp then headed to a favourite standby pub, now known as the Retro Bar. Hidden just off the Strand in the West End, the establishment avoided most tourists and drew mainly diverse Londoners in to relax in the cosy environment. A lot of Bowie and Blondie played from the jukebox, which the imp appreciated. He'd been coming to the pub for 200 years, though it had changed names a few times. A photo of him, with Grace Jones taken in 1984, hung above the corner table he went to sit at. Looking at the photo, he tried to remember if it had been taken before or after the two of them had banged over an overturned rubbish can in the alley. She kept referring to him as Princess Jenna while slapping his buttocks. Pooh's fond reminiscences were interrupted by a man walking unsteadily towards his table. The man leered at him, winked, and offered Pooh a drink of his paper umbrella-adorned cocktail, while saying, "You're a pretty young thing, girlie. How about a nice shag from a real man, sweetie? I'm not one of these cucks or twinks. When I'm done with you, you'll know you've been fucked. Ask me wife how that goes." Rubbing his crotch, he added, "There's 50 quid in it for you." Pooh arched an eyebrow and said, "Piss off, you disgusting oaf. First off, I'm a boy, okay, a very pretty one. Second off, I'm a boy with taste, a very pretty boy with taste, along with you. Go be alone with your silly concoction and inferior words. There's where your real truth lies, a silly concoction and inferior words." "How darest you come around here with your mediocrity?" Pooh steamed. "You're just a lummox desperate for validation and attention. Puff and ha! Puff and ha! Puff and ha! You cannot even rise to the level of a drunken jester to entertain me. Now shoo, lest I puncture your neck with this stiletto for boring me, you besotted stumblebum." Pooh paused, then looked deep in thought before declaring, "Oh, flip it to hell. I'm going to kill you anyway, just for the fun of it. Then I will dump your corpse on your raggedy-ass townhome's doorstep so that your beleaguered wife and half-witted child can rejoice in your passing, and then collect double indemnity on your life insurance policy, which can be used for Mrs. Stumblebum's liposuction and Stumblebum Jr.'s hair lip correction. They'll be presentable in no time. Now get over here and take your murder like a man. This won't take long. I'll put my heel right into your carotid artery. You'll be bled out in 15 seconds, and I can then doff my cap and be on with dragging your body home to the missus and Bugs Bunny. Hopefully, the rats will have their way with you before you're discovered. Nothing quite as pleasurable as hearing rats gnaw a body." Perhaps I should do your liver. That's much more painful, and then I can watch your agony for a good half-hour. But no, I'm sure the alcohol has made that organ particularly nasty. Let's make it a quick death." After misting the pub patrons into oblivion, the imp pounced on the drunk like a cat, stiletto in hand. "Now that's a lovely hissing sound. 10 more seconds, you dimwit." One lull entered the farm alone, while Thomas and Javier Coll remained out of sight, concealed behind a windbreak of cypresses and yew trees bordering the narrow track that led to it. Thomas sat down on the sun-baked ground during this enforced wait. He was quite tired after their long walk. "Will Grandpa and Grandma Alegre have a hard time?" "It's possible," said Javier. "They'll be asked questions about me. Is that it?" Javier nodded. "About me and other people." Thomas couldn't bring himself to say maman, and he hadn't wanted to say her. "Probably," said Javier. "Questions about you and Miguel and Juan and Tomeo?" "Grandpa and Grandma Alegre know me," said Javier, "but they don't know Miguel or Juan of Tomeo." "That's true." Thomas thought for a moment, and suddenly it all became clear, distressingly clear. "Van a matarlo," he said. To his ears the statement sounded less brutal in Spanish than it would have in French or German. "Who's going to kill them?" "Lo sabes muy bien," Thomas said. "You know very well." He turned away and gazed into the distance to disguise the fact that he was close to tears. It was then, as his eyes followed the line of the hills, that he registered something and automatically stored it in his talented memory without, for the moment, attaching much importance to it. The sound of an engine broke the silence. A small truck emerged from the farmyard and drove past without stopping, but slowly enough for Javier to hoist Thomas into the back and climb in beside him. They stretched out flat, hidden from view by the slatted sides, and a number of crates containing tomatoes. Thomas lay on his side on the hot, shiny steel floor. His eyes were still moist. "We ought to have brought Grandpa and Grandma Alegre with us." "They wouldn't have come," Javier said, very gently, too gently. It was obvious that he realised how sad Thomas felt, and was doing his best to comfort him, though fortunately not to the extent of posting his arms around him. Javier didn't want to raise the heat in the boy again, and anyway, Thomas didn't normally like to be hugged or comforted by anyone. The boy huddled up like a snail withdrawing into its shell. "They couldn't have come with us in any case," said Javier. "It wasn't part of the plan." "Let's not talk about it anymore," Thomas said. "Yes," said Javier. "Have a tomato." Thomas ate several. He was hungry, and it didn't do to discuss such things as hunger and thirst, sorrow, or its absence. "What about the Hispano?" "Don't worry, they'll never find it." Half an hour later the truck headed north, but just beyond Saint-Arme-de-Vanques it turned right off the main road onto a very steep, unsurfaced track. "You can sit up now," said Javier, sitting up himself. Thomas followed suit. 200 or 300 yards behind them, he spotted another small truck with 2 men on board. Tomeo was driving, and Miguel, the top of his head just visible above the cab, was riding in the back. The convoy drove on for a while. Then Javier rapped on the roof of the cab with his knuckles, and Juan pulled up. There wasn't a house in sight. "You're sure about the Hispano?" "Quite sure." The Spaniards got out and conferred in Malaquin, the sibilant and unintelligible Majorcan dialect they used when talking among themselves. Feeling excluded, Thomas went and sat on a boulder. He hadn't been worried at any stage by the possibility that she might not know where to find him after their abandonment of the Red Villa. Javier was bound to have done whatever was necessary. If the truth be told, now that he'd managed to banish Grandpa and Grandma Alegre, and even that mutt from his mind, the Hispano was his main worry. All things considered, he shared Javier's certainty that they would never find it. The trouble was, he longed desperately to see her again. They wouldn't speak. They might not even look at each other, but at least they would be together, side by side. It had been 2 years since he'd last seen her. 2 whole years. It was hard never seeing your mother. Really hard. The house is officially owned by some Swiss who... "Team not interested in the house," said Gregor Laimler. Henry Lafont smiled. "I understand. The woman, then. The Allegres knew her only as Sophie Lamiel. One evening in October 1931, when Joseph Alegre was still working at the naval dockyards, she pulled up outside their house in a Bugatti. Knowing that Marthe was pregnant and unmarried, they agreed to certain financial arrangements. Until 1933, she and her son lived in the villa with the Allegres. In 1933, she left, taking the boy with her. She didn't return for 4 years, but every year she paid the caretakers so that they could visit their so-called grandson wherever mother and son might be. There was a bond, and the boy was attached to them. They made trips to Switzerland, Italy and Spain to see him. Where in Spain? Mallorca, a hotel in Passa. They only ever saw her trunks, so never knew where she was really living. She brought the boy back to the villa in 1937 and left him there. After that, she began to stay away more and more often. She always spoke German when she phoned the boy. He speaks German, Spanish and English, as well as French, plus quite a bit of Latin. He's as bright as they come, apparently. In 1939, a Spaniard turned up at the villa. The one with 2 fingers missing. The same, 3rd and 4th fingers of the left hand, taller than me, around 6'2". Any photographs? Of him? No, not of the boy either. In Switzerland, one time when the old Allegri tried to snap the woman and her son with his box brownie, a man swooped on him and ripped the film out of the camera. A man called Miguel, or Michel. I have more. Thomas tried to guess the time from the sun, but there wasn't any sun, just a dazzling white glow that flooded the entire landscape and relentlessly gobbled up every last morsel of shadow. The dusty whiteness and expanses of bone-dry rock reminded him of Spain. He was there with her in the summer of 1937. They had just abandoned yet another house, the one in Murcia, and were heading north. She had called ahead and improvised a picnic. Juan Lul was driving, and Miguel was already there too, bleeding from the wound he'd received at the Battle of Teruel. Javier hadn't joined them yet, as he was still fighting at this time. The bomb had yet to go fall on his wife and 2 sons at their apartment across from the Sacred Heart School, and he still owned his architect's office in Barcelona. She and Thomas had spent 3 months there the year before, when Javier still had all his fingers. It was on that day she told him he would be returning to France to stay with Grandpa and Grandma Allegre. He wasn't to live with her any longer. Spain was too dangerous. "Please don't cry," she said. The sky had been the same dazzling white, and the heat just as oppressive as it was now, while Thomas was waiting for Javier and the other 3 to finish their confabulation in Malaquin. When it finally ended, Javier came over and sat down beside him on the boulder. It was a while before he made up his mind to speak, which signified that he had plenty to say. "The first point," he said at length, "is that they found you. I don't know how they managed it, but they did. That's all that matters. What about your room?" "I didn't leave anything important behind," Thomas said. "They can search the place for 100 years. "Good. You saw those 2 men on the road?" Thomas nodded. "So you'll know them if you see them again. Now, Thomas, I want you to think hard. I want you to evaluate everything that happened this morning from the moment you woke up." Thomas marshalled the various facts, taking his time. He knew what Javier was driving at. "I made 2 mistakes," he said. "One was to go outside and walk across the terrace and down the drive when I felt something was wrong. The other was to go see the Hispano. Do you understand why I'm making you acknowledge your mistakes? Think carefully." "I already did," Thomas said. "From now on, everything's going to be different. They nearly got me, and they'll never stop looking for me wherever I go. They know I exist and what my name is and what I look like, so I can't afford to make another mistake. Not ever." Javier bowed his head for a moment. There was a trace of melancholy in his dark eyes when he looked up again. "He's thinking of his 2 dead sons," Thomas told himself. "He's comparing me with them, and wondering what they might have become if that lousy bomb hadn't killed them, and he's awfully unhappy. You're a very intelligent boy, Thomas. It almost frightens me sometimes." Thomas noticed out of the corner of his eye that the other 3 Spaniards were on the move. Miguel, with a casual air, was edging slowly sideways like someone in search of shade, but that couldn't be his true intention. He was obviously about to do one of his vanishing tricks. Miguel was like wisp of smoke that disperses in a poof, leaving no trace. Javier said, "One doesn't usually say such things to a little boy. One doesn't pay him such compliments in case he gets a swelled head. I don't think there's any risk of that with you, but it doesn't stop me worrying about you. It's difficult to live as you do, with a well-oiled machine ticking away in your head night and day. In your case, it could be very dangerous. You might become overconfident and assume that the people hunting for you are easily deceived. You understand? One understand, Thomas said with a smile. He couldn't recall ever having heard Javier speak at such length except once, years ago, when his mother and Javier had been at the house in Mallorca, but that was in another age and another life. Javier had been the soul of gaiety then. Thomas yearned to tell him how sad he was about his two sons, the ones that had died in the air raid, but it wouldn't have helped. The less you said about things that really saddened you, the better. It was the same with Grandpa and Grandma Alegre and their mutt. You stopped talking about them and buried their memory as deep as possible inside you. There wasn't any other way. There was another thought that Thomas would have to ponder. In him, did Javier need a replacement for his sons or his wife? Back at the villa, it felt like he wanted a new mate, which was his right, but now things felt differently. I'll be very careful, Thomas said. Good, said Javier. He rose. All the Spaniards were now standing in front of Thomas as he sat perched on the boulder with his legs dangling, like a solitary prisoner in the dock. All the Spaniards save one. Almost without perceptible movement and certainly without any sign or sound, Miguel had melted into the landscape. Thomas, said Javier. When Miguel and Tomeo covered our escape by opening fire, Miguel spotted someone in the distance, a tall, fair-haired man. He was watching the whole operation through binoculars from a hilltop. There was another lookout over toward Bandol. Thomas had a lightning recollection of the details he'd automatically filed away in his memory while waiting for Juan to pick them up in the truck. A man on a motorbike, at least a kilometre away. He had a pair of binoculars too, I think, revealed Thomas. A man whose presence Bee should have reported at once, but he'd been wrestling with his grief at the thought of Grandpa and Grandma Alegre. Forgetting to mention him was another mistake he made. Let's discuss the reason why those men were there. If you were an ordinary little boy, we wouldn't involve you in such matters. We'd just tell you what to do, and you do. It's because we're responsible for you, even though we've made some serious mistakes ourselves. But you aren't an ordinary little boy, so you know what the presence of those men suggests, don't you? Again, Thomas paused for thought, then he stated, There are two groups. One was supposed to storm the house and capture me. The others were to simply shadow me. They may have different leaders. Go on, said Javier, or else there's only one man in charge, but he's very cunning. He guessed the first group wouldn't capture me because of you, so the wisest policy was to make us think we'd escaped and then follow us. Maybe to be sure of capturing me later, or maybe, Thomas broke off again. Everything had become frighteningly clear to him. Maybe they want her. Was she supposed to be coming for my birthday? Yes, especially as she didn't make it last year. Is she in France? I don't know yet. I've no idea where she is. I was supposed to hear today. What if she went to the villa? Javier shook his head. No danger of that, thank God. I was to take you to her, not the other way around. Except that it's impossible now, said Thomas, heartbroken at having precisely reached the conclusion Javier had meant him to reach. They mustn't capture her, Thomas said, as if he were announcing his own death. No, they mustn't. Then I'd rather not see her. Thomas felt his throat tighten as he uttered the words. Every syllable was a drop of blood. His head was spinning, and he wanted to be sick. He clung despairingly to the boulder beneath him. For someone who had been counting the months, weeks, days, and hours till he saw her again, to say what he'd just said had been the hardest thing in the world. It would be wiser not to, I think. You've made a very brave decision, Thomas, but I shall somehow contrive to reach her without being followed. She must be very anxious to see you, so much so that she may risk everything. You must tell her I don't want to see her, and that she isn't to come looking for me. Be sure to tell her that from me. Javier simply nodded. It was clear that he too found speaking an effort. Periodically broken by a hiss or splutter from the truck's charcoal burners, the ensuing silence was so awkward that everyone felt relieved when a faint sound intruded. A tiny pebble came bouncing down the track, not dislodged by chance but propelled by some human agency. It was a signal. Thomas was about to look up when he noticed that none of the other three had even glanced in the direction of the rocks from which the pebble had undoubtedly come. He froze. Javier was looking at him and talking, but not to him. He had switched to Malaquin. Although Thomas didn't speak the language, it was close enough to Castilian and French for him I.O. get the gist. There was no doubt about it. Javier and the unseen Miguel were discussing a man on a motorbike, a man who was watching them through binoculars from several hundred yards away, a man who was about to die. I hope, Thomas thought with savage hatred, I hope they hurt him before they kill him. Chapter 9. Rope Bunny.
I didn't always look this seedy naked. With clothes on, I still looked pretty clean cut, but that's just for the sake of not scaring the little boys on the playground. I look sweet and safe. Get me naked, though, and you'll see all the tattoos and scars my master Rope Bunny has put on me. Fag, slave, whore, worthless, fuck toy, owned, cream pie for hire, and more all permanently marked on me. Then there are the scars and the piercings. Rope Bunny is a demon. I didn't know that at the time. Now I'm its slave. I suppose that was my destiny. One day, I was messing around at a park where hookups are known to take place. I sat on a picnic table in a semi-secluded area when an unbathed, druggy-looking dude named Trig came and sat with me. Shirtless, short, skinny, sunken-eyed, shallow-cheeked, big red tongue, beady eyes, dirty jeans, and boots. He looked like he was in high school unless he'd dropped out. We kind of flirted, and then he began rubbing my thigh and other places, like he didn't need permission. I was curious, as I had a growing taste for bad boys, or thought I did. My polar opposites. I'd been reading some stuff online and gotten turned on by the bully rough boys making the good boys do things to them. Something had churned inside of me, and I wanted to become soiled. Being gay and out wasn't turning out so well. I wanted pretty clothes, musical theater, and a cute boyfriend. Rainbows and parades. I wanted to dance. I wanted the ballet. I wanted applause. I wanted people to like me and not pick on me or hurt me or act as if I was dirty and damaged and unnatural. I wanted recognition for my dance talents instead of people saying it was sissy stuff. My lessons were hard. I bled. I bruised. I developed every muscle in my body. I was a suburb athlete. But it wasn't football or wrestling or any locker room sport where the boys slapped each other on the butt, then went looking for a sissy to push around. No one cared. It hurt so much. I cried a lot. The way people, fellow students, and even my family treated me was nothing short of degrading. I was very young and very impressionable. I believed them. So, if I was doomed to be this fairy monster, then that's what I would be. I'd be as disgusting as they saw me. I'd live up to everyone's low expectations. Hell, I'd start drinking, using drugs, skipping school, sleeping with dregs, letting men pass me around at some queer orgy, whatever. That's what they expected of me, so I'd just give in. I might even just fucking kill myself, so no one would have to have me around to embarrass them. When Trig told me that he was taking me home to fuck me, I didn't hesitate. I hopped on the back of his motorcycle to begin the life everyone had condemned me to. It's just that when I got on the back of Trig's motorcycle, so we could go to his place, I had no idea my old life was behind me. All the hopes and dreams I had for myself were never going to happen. I just wanted to dance, have a sweetie, be treated kindly. I held onto Trig with my arms around his waist as we rode along with me, not knowing he wasn't even human. For now, I'll skip the part where who I now know likes to be called Rope Bunny, did very terrible and very painful things to me for month after month, year after year, until he started tiring of me. He's a snouted hoof demon with pink skin and thin white hair. Ugly as sin, but I've grown accustomed to his looks and what he does to me. I am my master's obedient slave. I wasn't at first, but to survive, that's how I became. Now I'd never think of leaving him. I'm spoiled and ruined. I could never go home like this. I wouldn't want them to look at me with their condescending stares. I'd become exactly what they thought I would become. Rope Bunny likes prepubescent boys and tweens. He's had me for 3 years, so now at 15, he uses me to go snatch little boys on the playground and at the park. Then we hurt them. I block out their screams the best I can. Theirs and my own.
"Where's my tidbit?" growled Rope Bunny. "Oh, sugar baby, you have another visitor," laughed Jonas. And now I present to you, lovelies, Book 2, Plague Island, the exciting conclusion to Book 2. Don't cry. Okay, you're probably going to cry a little bit. Here's a hanky. The imp arrived at Plague Island just as agents Banshee and Hummer misted in with 5 trainees: Kabob, Romp, Bugs, Blitzen, and one named Bubbles, very young and just out of processing. Located in the Persian Gulf, Plague Island had once been the realm of the Mesopotamian demon Lord Nergal, who Candyman slew during the Great Demon and God War. The demon was thought to have not been revitalized after its killing, as no one had sensed the Deathbringer for 2,000 years. Candyman relocated the island away from Nergal's homeland and put it near Venice and Lido in the Venetian lagoon. He eventually regretted doing that, as in the late 18th century, mortals built an insane asylum on the island and began quarantining plague victims there as well. The ancient being put the island back in the Persian Gulf, where it had been originally to deter further human storage. Ganymede dubbed it Plague Island. The name stuck among the isle inhabitants, who detested the lifeless place. Its only real use was to scare and train newbie recruits. Otherwise, it was avoided. Nothing lived on Plague Island anymore, not that it had possessed much life in the past. All the trees, shrubs, and island plants were dead. No animal, furry or feathered, could be seen. No insects buzzed about, nor did crabs skittle along the shore. The air even seemed dead. It was an island of skeletons. Nergal was the death god of Mesopotamia. At least the being was worshipped as a god. In reality, Nergal was a demon lord. Pooh stopped and shouted, "Trainee Bug, stop making out with that skeleton," kissing the bag of bones like it was a warm lover. "I'll not have it, even in jest." "Oh, you gave it a boner," teased trainee Kabob. "Pay attention, we're not here for play." The trainees weren't near as afraid of the skeletons as Pooh wanted them to be. They'd already been exposed to the Isle and its haunts and terrors in the natural world. With the exception of trainee Bubbles, who had saddled up to Pooh's side and wanted to hold his hand, the piles of skeletonized plague victims and lunatics just weren't terrifying to them. They needed to be a little scared to take the exercise in earnest, while dampening down their fear in the middle of conjuring. They'd be working under pressure on missions where the terrors would come fast, so conditioning them to choke down fear was an important aspect of their education. Clearly, however, trainee Bubbles was entirely too skittish for the lesson. It required fear, but control of that fear. The child had reached out and grabbed his commander's hand. "Brace up, trainee Bubbles. We're just here to train. The skeletons just look spooky. They cannot harm you," encouraged Pooh. "All right, trainees, line up. I'm to instruct you on invoking minor spirits, which you will use the pink mist to wrangle into a skeleton of your choice. If you're successful, the spirit will be trapped. If not, you'll do it again until you get it right." "You can stand by me, Bubbles. You're still raw. We'll prepare you better for next time." As trainee Bubbles exhaled a sigh of relief, a shriek came out of the trees, followed by a skeleton, who plunged its bony hand through the child's back. The imp yelled out in alarm, then instinctively did a kick to the skeleton's face, shattering it into a pile of bones. Pooh had sensed no danger, nor had the 2 other experienced agents. He pushed out and still sensed nothing. Nothing else was coming. Nothing was moving. The attacker had flanked them without warning, yet something was afoot. "Everyone, assemble in and keep a sharp eye out on the trees." Then Pooh stooped to aid Bubbles. Pulling 3 bony fingers from the boy's chest, he grimaced, knowing the trainee was perishing. As he held him against his chest, Pooh pushed pink mist into the badly bleeding boy. "It's to keep your soul in, Bubby," he softly whispered in the ear of the dying trainee. At that point, screeches started coming from everywhere. The skeletons were rising up around them in the asylum cemetery and coming in from all around. The 4 standing trainees were now huddled together and crying. "Agent Hummer, you get Kabob and Bugs behind me. Banshee, you've got Romp and Blitzen. I'll take the front and call the mist while you watch our backs. Protect your charges. I've Bubbles. Move!" Waving his hand, Pooh sent a volley of fireballs from the pink mist into the skeletons, who now numbered in the hundreds. It had little effect, as they were drenched in their master's black mist. The god of death had retaken Plague Island from Candyman without anyone's knowledge. It was controlling its horde from beyond, but Pooh could now smell the beast's influence. The odour was just as bad as it was when he met the foul one long ago in Babylon. He and Nergal were not friends, but they knew each other via the imp's travels back in time, well before Candyman took his competitor down. Nergal was re-establishing its realm of the soulless dead. Just Pooh, 2 agents, and the 4 remaining raw recruits weren't going to be enough to stop the Demon Lord's possessed legion of skeletons. If Nurgle manifested, they were all certainly dead. Escape was their only option. Pooh tried to invoke the pink mist into taking them all back to the Isle, but the black mist was drifting in, prohibiting its power. They'd need distance from it to get off Plague Island. Nurgle's skeletons had overwhelmed Agent Hummer, who was busy trying to push Kebab and Bugs out of harm's way. The fiends ripped at his clothing and his flesh as they dragged him away from the fleeing, screaming trainees. Still holding the gasping Bubbles in his arms, Pooh shouted, "Retreat! Everyone to the shore! Agent Banshee, clear us a path on the left flank!" While Agent Banshee's piercing shrieks sent skeleton bones flying on one side, Pooh shifted Bubbles to his shoulder and began lodging pellet bombs into the horde on their right flank, while kicking at any skeleton getting too close. The mini-bombs contained pink mist particles and silver. The silver at least would help. It disoriented their attackers, while clearing a path for escape. Agent Hummer had fallen. Bubbles was down. That left Pooh and Banshee to get the 4 other trainees to safety and to where the imp could load everyone into the pink mist for a hasty exit. Pooh desperately needed his getaway mist. Making it to the shore, Agent Banshee and Pooh gathered the trainees closely to them, while the skeleton horde once again started advancing, but they had some distance from the black mist. The pink mist came and carried the team off. "I'll come back for you, Tracy. I swear it," vowed Pooh. "Will you?" Tugger's voice whispered through the mist. The courtyard was in chaos. "Fetch the medics," Pooh ordered, as 2 agents dashed by him. There was a lot of commotion going on, but he first needed to see to Bubbles. He laid the trainee gently on the ground, remembering how the boy had been scared and wanted only to hold Pooh's hand. It wasn't the first time. The abandoned, terrified, dying 7-year-old Adam Dyer had reached out his hand in Orlando just 4 months ago. When a boy came out of a pink mist and peered over the edge of the dumpster his body had been thrown in. Things went dark, then got light again. The strange boy pulled Adam out of the trash, kissed his cheek, and told him, "It'll be okay. Come home with me, love." Kebab, Bugs and Blitzen kneeled down beside the boy sobbing and reached out to touch their injured friend, squeezing his hands with reassurances while applying pressure to his bleeding wounds. Bubbles' body and soul had suffered severe blows. These were done by supernatural inflections, so his soul was at risk. Pooh had used the pink mist to bind the physical essence Bubbles had materialized on Plague Island, with a refashioned body possessed by his soul. Normally the body would evaporate once the soul entered the pink mist, and then would be refashioned on return to the Isle. Pooh understood that Bubbles would be incapable of doing that in his condition. Thus, the body the boy had used, fashioned from the one he had during mortal life, needed to still be linked with the soul so that they could tend to him. Pooh had taken the trainees to Plague Island to teach them how to imprison spirits to inanimate objects. Here he had bound a soul to an animate object, the boy's body. They would live or die as one. Pooh heard Agent Whopper's bugle sounding a call to battle. He immediately rushed to where everyone was arming for immediate combat. "Buffalo Soldier, what's happening?" Pooh queried his second-in-command. Snapping to attention, the youth relayed, "Sir, we've received urgent dispatches," he said, before pausing to look down at the ground and adding, "It's bad. Agent Honeysuckle was burned to death at the young leader's lair, and Sugar Baby is down. The subterraneans have him. Barcelona was a trap. They're taunting us with recordings of his tortures and screams," the aide-de-camp said, with a mix of anger and sorrow. Sugar Baby did manage to yell out that the swarm was there, as were the vampires, and a band of Cambions led by a demidemon named Jonas, and that they were coming for the Isle. Italian and Vatican media are reporting that the city of Barcelona has fallen to terrorist attack, and the black mist the people were seeing from afar was something akin to nerve gas. No one is allowed in or out. Their military has the place surrounded. Clearly, with that many Dark Ones gathered, they'll be feeding heavily on the locals. Pooh's eyes widened, then his head lowered in sadness. Taking a deep breath, he straightened tall, wiped a tear from his eye, and then sounded a list of orders to his aide-de-camp. "General quarters. They're making their move. The Isle must not fall, or it will be doom for us all. Bring all agents home. Call for the battle boys. Send dispatches to our allies. Open the cells, unchain Tatters, waken Mother Osun. I'll go down below the castle and talk with Candyman. Ready for war. We must protect Candyman at all costs. If our master falls, so will we all.
One shot to the head, I need a blank space. 'Cause everything is a threat, but I never back down, man, I'd rather be dead. I'm making love to fate, and she look better in bed. And I'ma rock this life till I take my last breath. I wanna make a change, I got one life left, so I'm gonna go down swinging, don't you forget. Everything is so boring, can't get up in the morning. I'm so sick of the mundane and routine. I'm gonna break without warning. I wanna taste the pain, I think I'm seeing all red. 2 bullets in the gun, 1 shot to the head, I need a blank space. 'Cause everything is a threat, but I never back down, man, I'd rather be dead. I'm making love to fate, and she look better in bed. And I'ma rock this life till I take my last breath. I wanna make a change, I got one life left, so I'm gonna go down swinging, don't you forget. I've gotta find a new purpose, something actually worth it. I wanna look in the mirror and like what I see. I'm sick of feeling so worthless. You wanna sink or swim? I'm gonna go down swinging, look deep within. I get lost in the feeling, I just need a win. I'm going off, I know it's time to make a change, and I can take the pain. You wanna sink or swim? I'm gonna go down swinging, look deep within. I get lost in the feeling, I just need a win. I'm gonna find my meaning, I can make a change. I wanna play